At exactly 2:47 a.m., Victoria Hale's empire was dying. The woman who'd humiliated a maintenance worker 12 hours earlier now stood frozen in her glass tower, watching 8 years of success evaporate across 17 monitors. Client accounts corrupted, trading systems hemorrhaging money, her elite engineers useless. And the only person who could save her? The single father she'd publicly destroyed that afternoon, the man whose daughter had watched through the window as Victoria called him maintenance work at best, pride versus survival, reputation versus truth. This is the story of what happens when the person you underestimate turns out to be the only one who can save you. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Sterling Gate Financial's lobby hummed with that particular frequency that made Ethan Cole's jaw ache. He'd noticed it the moment he walked through the revolving doors. The kind of electrical issue that maintenance guys spotted, but corporate types never heard. 43rd floor, northeast corner. Ballast going bad. Someone would call it in eventually, probably blame the cleaning crew first. He shifted the manila folder against his chest and glanced back at the lobby seating area. Sophie sat exactly where he'd left her, 7 years old and drowning in her purple jacket, legs swinging 6 inches above the marble floor. Her backpack, covered in stars she'd drawn herself with fabric markers, sat beside her like a loyal dog. She had her library book open, but her eyes kept finding him instead of the pages. Ethan gave her a small wave. She waved back, then made an exaggerated serious face and gave him 2 thumbs up. His chest went tight. This interview mattered. Not in the abstract way most interviews mattered, but in the concrete sense of rent and groceries and whether Sophie's shoes would last another month. The senior engineering position at Sterling Gate would mean stability. It would mean he could stop working 3 different maintenance contracts across Chicago just to keep them afloat. It would mean maybe, just maybe, Sophie could do gymnastics like the other girls in her class, instead of spending every evening in whatever break room would let her do homework, while Ethan fixed their HVAC systems. Mr. Cole? The receptionist's voice cut through his thoughts. She was young, probably fresh out of college, with the kind of careful politeness that came from being trained to guard access to important people. They're ready for you. 42nd floor, conference room C. Elevators are to your right. Ethan nodded, looked back at Sophie one more time. She was watching him with those huge dark eyes, her mother's eyes, though he tried not to think about that. He pointed to his watch, held up both hands. 10 minutes. She nodded, understanding. The elevator was the expensive kind, the type that didn't feel like it was moving at all. Ethan caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. 32 years old, but the mirror didn't lie. He looked tired. The blue button-down he'd bought specifically for this interview was already rumpled despite his best efforts. His hands, no matter how much he'd scrubbed them, still had the faint staining that came from years of working with industrial equipment. He'd been 17 when he'd first taught himself to code. No computer science degree, no fancy boot camp. Just a broken laptop someone had thrown away, nights at the public library, and a mind that understood systems the way some people understood music. By 19, he'd been freelancing, building solutions for small businesses that couldn't afford the big consulting firms. And then he'd met Sarah. Sarah with her bright laugh and bigger dreams. Sarah who'd gotten pregnant accidentally and married him impulsively and realized too late that being married to someone who worked with computers wasn't the same as being married to someone who worked in tech. There was a difference, she'd explained when Sophie was 3. Ethan fixed things. But he wasn't ambitious, he wasn't going anywhere. She'd left on a Tuesday. Ethan had come home from a database recovery job to find half the apartment empty and a note on the kitchen counter. She'd signed away custody without a fight, packed everything she wanted into her car, and driven out of Chicago towards something better. That was 4 years ago. The elevator chimed. 42nd floor. Ethan stepped into a hallway that probably cost more per square foot than his entire apartment. Everything was glass and steel and the kind of calculated minimalism that screamed money. Through the windows, Chicago spread out like a circuit board, all lights and patterns and logical connections. Conference room C had glass walls. Of course it did. Nothing in this building seemed designed for privacy. 3 people sat at the long table, 2 men in suits that probably cost what Ethan made in a month. And Ethan stopped in the doorway. He'd researched Victoria Hale before applying. 30 years old, Sterling Gates CEO for the past 2 years after her father's retirement, Harvard MBA, featured in Forbes and Bloomberg, known for aggressive expansion and ruthless efficiency. The articles always used words like visionary and uncompromising. The photographs hadn't prepared him for meeting her in person. She sat at the head of the table, dark hair pulled back severely, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his security deposit. But it was her eyes that caught him, sharp and assessing, the kind of intelligence that didn't miss anything. Those eyes swept over him in approximately 3 seconds, and in that brief moment, Ethan watched her categorize him completely. Working class, cheap shirt, worn shoes, maintenance background, not worth her time. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was crisp, professional, bored. "Please, sit." Ethan sat. The chair was leather, expensive, uncomfortable. One of the suited men, gray hair, expensive watch, spoke first. "I'm Richard Peterson, VP of Technology. This is James Wen, our Chief Systems Architect." The Asian man beside him nodded curtly. "We've reviewed your application. Your resume is interesting." Victoria's tone made interesting sound like an insult. She had the folder open in front of her, and Ethan could see his carefully prepared pages inside. "No formal degree in computer science." "No, ma'am." Ethan kept his voice level. "Self-taught, but I have 15 years of maintenance work." She said it flatly, cutting him off. Her finger traced down the page. "Building systems, HVAC control networks, security infrastructure." She looked up, and there was something cold in her expression. "And you're applying for a senior engineering position?" The room went quiet. James Wen shifted uncomfortably. Richard Peterson studied his hands. "I understand the maintenance background might seem unusual," Ethan said carefully, "but I've designed and implemented network systems for buildings." Victoria closed the folder. "Mr. Cole, Sterling Gate Financial handles billions of dollars in assets. Our systems require expertise in high-frequency trading platforms, real-time risk analysis, distributed ledger technology. We're not looking for someone who can rewire an office building." Heat crept up Ethan's neck. "With respect, Mrs. Hale." "Ms. Hale." "Ms. Hale, if you look at page 3, I've detailed the financial modeling systems I developed for." "I've looked." She leaned back in her chair, and Ethan realized this wasn't really an interview. This was a formality before a rejection she'd already decided. "Your experience is impressive for someone without formal training, but it's not relevant to what we do here. Building management systems, even complex ones, don't translate to financial technology at our scale." Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. Not anger. Worse. The quiet devastation of watching another door close. "I appreciate you coming in," Victoria continued, her tone shifting to the practiced dismissiveness of someone ending an unpleasant obligation. "But I think it's clear this isn't the right fit." Richard Peterson at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mr. Cole, we do have some entry-level positions in our IT support department that might—" "IT support." Ethan heard his own voice say the words flat and distant. "It would be a foot in the door," Richard offered weakly. "Good benefits, room for growth." Victoria was already standing, already moving toward the door. Interview over, decision made, time to go back to whatever important work she'd been interrupted from. Ethan stood slowly. He picked up his folder with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. Not here. Not in front of them. "Thank you for your time." The words came out automatic, professional, empty. James Wen at least met his eyes. There was something apologetic there, but not enough to matter. Victoria held the door open, waiting for him to leave. "Good luck with your job search, Mr. Cole." He walked past her without responding. The hallway seemed longer on the way back. The elevator took forever. And when he finally stepped back into the lobby, Sophie was there, looking up from her book with hopeful eyes. "How'd it go, Dad?" Ethan forced a smile. It felt like breaking glass. "Let's go home, sweetheart." She stood, gathering her backpack. "Did you get it?" "Not this time." Sophie's face fell. She was 7. She didn't understand about bills and rent and the difference between fixing things and building them. She didn't understand that her father's best would never be good enough for people like Victoria Hale. But she understood disappointment. "It's okay." Sophie said quietly, taking his hand. You'll get the next one. They walked toward the revolving doors. And because the universe had a sense of timing, Ethan looked back at exactly the wrong moment. Through the glass wall of the conference room on the 42nd floor, visible from the lobby through the building's deliberately transparent architecture, he could see Victoria Hale and her executives still standing there. Victoria was laughing at something, her earlier coldness replaced with easy warmth now that the unpleasant interview was over. She glanced down toward the lobby, and for a brief second her eyes met his through 42 floors of expensive glass. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look cruel. She just looked past him, through him, like he was already gone. Ethan turned away. Dad? Sophie's voice was small. Did something bad happen? No, baby, nothing bad happened. But Sophie wasn't 7 for nothing. She'd been watching through the glass, too, in the way children noticed everything adults thought they'd hidden. She'd seen her father's shoulders drop in the elevator. She'd seen him come back different than he'd left. That lady was mean to you. Ethan stopped walking. What? The lady in the gray suit. I saw her face when she was talking to you. Sophie squeezed his hand. She looked mean. It's not... Ethan started, then stopped. What was he supposed to say? That Sophie was wrong? That the world was fair? That people judged you on merit instead of pedigree? He was tired of lying. Yeah, he said quietly. She was kind of mean. They pushed through the revolving doors into Chicago's autumn afternoon. The October air was sharp, carrying the smell of early frost and Lake Michigan's cold breath. Ethan pulled out his phone to check the time and felt his stomach drop. 3 missed calls from Building Services Group. 2 voicemails. He'd forgotten. In the stress of preparing for the interview, he'd completely forgotten he was supposed to be at the Riverside Plaza building right now, troubleshooting their central air system before the evening rush. Shit, the word slipped out. Dad, that's a bad word. Sorry, I need to make a phone call. He dialed the number with shaking hands. Ron Patterson answered on the second ring. Cole, where the hell are you? Ron, I'm so sorry. I had an interview this morning and... I don't care if you were meeting the president. You missed your window. Riverside called it in at noon when their system went down completely. I had to send Marcus instead. Ethan's mouth went dry. Ron, please, it won't happen again. You're reliable, Ethan. That's the only reason you're still on my roster. But reliable means showing up. I can't have guys who disappear for interviews. It was one time, one interview. And how'd it go? The question hung there, cruel in its casual delivery. I didn't get it, Ethan admitted. Ron sighed, and Ethan could picture him rubbing his forehead in the way he did when he was disappointed rather than angry. Look, you're good at what you do. Stop chasing these tech jobs and focus on the work you've got. I'll keep you on the schedule, but no more missed appointments. Clear? Clear. The call ended. Sophie was watching him with those huge eyes. Are you in trouble? No, baby. Just adult stuff. He knelt down to her level, adjusting her backpack straps. How about we get pizza for dinner? We don't have pizza money, she said it matter-of-factly, without judgment, 7 years old and already doing the math on their finances. Ethan's heart broke a little more. Tonight we do. They took the L train home, Sophie pressed against the window watching the city blur past. Ethan stared at his reflection in the scratched plastic and tried not to think about Victoria Hale's face when she'd dismissed him. Tried not to think about the condescension in her voice when she'd said maintenance work at best. But his mind kept circling back to something else. During the interview, James Wen had mentioned they were in the middle of a systems integration, merging Sterling Gates' legacy trading platform with a new distributed architecture. Standard upgrade for a growing financial firm. Routine. Except it wasn't routine. Ethan had seen the edge of a systems diagram on Richard Peterson's tablet, just a glimpse as the man had shifted in his seat. And in that brief moment, Ethan's mind had grabbed onto something wrong. The integration pattern they were using. It wouldn't work. Not with the kind of load balancing their legacy system required. There was a timing conflict in how they'd structured the data handoffs, the kind of thing that would look fine in testing but fall apart under real-world stress. He'd opened his mouth to mention it, but Victoria had already been dismissing him. Now, riding the L train with Sophie's weight warm against his side, Ethan pulled out the small notebook he always carried. He sketched out what he'd seen, filling in the gaps from experience and instinct. Yeah, that would fail. Probably catastrophically. He should tell someone. But who? He had no contact information beyond the general HR email. And even if he did, why would they listen? He was just the maintenance guy who'd embarrassed himself in their conference room.
Dad, you're doing your thinking face. Ethan looked down. Sophie was grinning at him. My thinking face? You get this little wrinkle. She touched her own forehead. Like when you're fixing something hard. He tucked the notebook away. Just work stuff. Nothing important.
But it nagged at him through dinner. Discount pizza from the place near their apartment that sold day-old slices cheap. It nagged at him while he helped Sophie with her homework, while he gave her a bath, while he read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through together. Dad? Sophie's voice was sleepy, her head on the pillow. Are we going to be okay? Always, baby, I promise. Even without the job? Even without the job. She yawned. Good, because you're the smartest person I know. They were dumb for not hiring you. Ethan kissed her forehead. Go to sleep, troublemaker. But after she drifted off, he sat at the kitchen table with his notebook open, staring at the sketch diagram. The logical part of his brain understood that Sterling Gates' problems weren't his responsibility. He didn't owe them anything. They'd made it clear what they thought of him. The other part of his brain, the part that had spent 15 years building systems and learning to spot failures before they happened, couldn't let it go. At 11:43 p.m., he drafted an email to Sterling Gates' general info address. Professional. Concise. Explaining the potential integration conflict and suggesting a review of their handoff protocols. He hit send before he could talk himself out of it. Then he closed the laptop and went to bed, certain that nobody would read it, nobody would care, and by morning this whole disaster of a day would just be another bad memory to file away with all the others. Ethan woke at 2:47 a.m. to his phone screaming. Not ringing. Screaming. The emergency alert sound he'd set for the building services group's urgent contact line, the one that only went off when something catastrophic was happening and they needed all hands on deck. He fumbled for the phone in the dark, heart already racing. Hello? Cole. Ron Patterson's voice was tight. I know what time it is. I know I told you to focus on building work, but I just got the strangest call of my life. Ethan sat up, trying to shake off sleep. What's going on? Sterling Gate Financial is on fire. What? Not literally. Their computer systems. Everything's crashed. They're losing millions. And apparently someone there read your email about the integration problem because they're asking for you specifically. Ethan's blood went cold. What? Their CEO. Victoria something. She called me directly. Don't ask me how she got my number. She said they need you at their offices immediately, said their entire company is going down and you're the only person who predicted this. The room spun. Ethan gripped the phone harder. Ron, I can't. I have Sophie. I can't just... She's offering $5,000 for tonight alone, just to consult. More if you fix it. $5,000. Ethan thought about rent, about Sophie's shoes, about the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. I'll need to bring my daughter. I can't leave her alone. Bring whoever you need. Cole? Ron's voice softened slightly. This could be big, like change your life big. Don't screw it up. The call ended. Ethan sat in the dark for approximately 10 seconds, then moved. Sophie woke confused and cranky as he bundled her into warm clothes. Dad, it's nighttime. I know, baby. I have to go fix something. Emergency. Can't someone else fix it? Apparently not. He grabbed his laptop bag, checked twice that he had Sophie's tablet for her to watch something during the drive, and carried his half-asleep daughter down to the parking lot where their 14-year-old Civic waited. Chicago at 3 a.m. was a different city. Quieter. Darker. The Loop's towers glowed like vertical runways, and Sterling Gate Financial's building stood among them, every window blazing with panicked light. Ethan pulled into the parking garage with his heart hammering. Sophie was dozing in the back seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Cole? A woman's voice, professional but frayed. This is Amanda from Sterling Gate. Ms. Hale asked me to meet you at the executive garage entrance. Where are you? Just pulled in, level 3. Stay there. I'm coming to you. 2 minutes later, a young woman in a business suit that looked like it had been through a war appeared beside his car. Her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. Mr. Cole, thank God, Ms. Hale is... Everyone is... She stopped, gathered herself. We're in crisis mode. The entire trading platform collapsed 2 hours ago. We've lost client data integrity. Automated trades are executing incorrectly. We could lose everything. Ethan looked back at Sophie, still sleeping. I have my daughter. Amanda barely blinked. We'll set up a space for her, please. We're desperate. They took a private elevator straight to the 42nd floor. Sophie woke up enough to walk, holding Ethan's hand and looking around with confused 7-year-old wonder at the chaos surrounding them. Because it was chaos. The floor looked like a disaster zone. Engineers hunched over laptops at every available surface, whiteboards covered in frantic diagrams, empty coffee cups everywhere, and through it all, voices raised in argument and desperation. Told you the rollback wouldn't work. Client accounts are corrupted. We need to get the backup systems online before... Amanda led them through the madness to a small conference room. She can stay here. We have a couch, blankets. I'm not leaving my daughter alone in a strange building at 3 a.m. Then bring her with you. I don't care. Ms. Hale is in the server room. The server room was freezing and humming with the sound of struggling machinery. 20 people crowded inside, all looking at monitors displaying cascading errors. And in the center of it all stood Victoria Hale. She looked nothing like the composed CEO from that afternoon. Her suit jacket was gone. Her hair had come partially loose from its severe style. She was gripping a tablet like a weapon, and when she looked up and saw Ethan, something flickered across her face. Relief. Desperation. And underneath it, the smallest trace of shame. Mr. Cole? Her voice was hoarse. Thank you for coming. The room went quiet. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the maintenance worker holding his daughter's hand. James Wen was there, looking gray and exhausted. Victoria, he's not... He predicted this. Victoria cut him off. She held up her phone, and Ethan recognized his email on the screen. He sent this at 11:47 p.m., 8 hours before the system collapsed. He identified the exact integration conflict that's killing us right now. Richard Peterson emerged from behind a server rack. Ms. Hale, with all due respect, we have consultants from... Your consultants have been here for 6 hours and we're still dying. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. Mr. Cole walked into one interview, saw one partial diagram, and diagnosed our critical failure point. So maybe, just maybe, we should let him try. The silence was deafening. Sophie squeezed Ethan's hand. He looked down at her, and she gave him that same exaggerated, serious face from the lobby, the thumbs up. Okay, Ethan said quietly. Show me what you've got. What they had was a disaster. Ethan set Sophie up on a rolling chair with her tablet and headphones, made her promise to stay put, then dove into the system architecture with the kind of focus that made the rest of the world disappear. The integration had failed exactly how he'd predicted. The new distributed system was trying to sync with the legacy platform, but the timing protocols were mismatched. Every handoff was creating data conflicts. Client accounts were being corrupted. Automated trading algorithms were making decisions based on garbage data. And the elite engineers had been trying to fix it by patching the symptoms instead of addressing the core problem. Stop! Ethan's voice cut through another argument between consultants. Stop trying to save the corrupted data. You're making it worse. A man in an expensive consulting firm's polo shirt bristled. We need to preserve data integrity. You don't have data integrity to preserve. It's already corrupted. Every attempt to recover it is spreading the corruption deeper. Ethan pulled up the core integration code. You need to isolate the legacy system completely, purge the corrupted sync caches, and rebuild the handoff protocol from scratch. That could take days, James Wen said. It'll take me about 20 minutes if you let me work and stop talking. Victoria, to her credit, made the call. Everyone out, give him space. Ms. Hale, out. Now. They filed out slowly, reluctantly. The consultants especially looked offended. Victoria was the last to leave, pausing at the door. Mr. Cole. Ethan looked up from the terminal. This afternoon, in the interview, I was... She stopped, searching for words. I made assumptions. I was wrong. Yeah, Ethan said simply. You were. She nodded once and left. Ethan worked in the cold, humming silence, his fingers moving across the keyboard with the muscle memory of 15 years. Beside him, Sophie had abandoned her tablet and was watching the code scroll across the screens with fascination. Dad? What are all those words? Instructions for computers, baby. It looks like magic. Kind of is. The problem unraveled under his hands. Isolate, purge, rebuild. The system architecture made sense to him in a way it apparently didn't to anyone else here. He could see the logical flow, spot the conflicts, understand how the pieces were supposed to fit together. 11 minutes after everyone left, the error cascade stopped. 14 minutes in, the core system stabilized. By minute 17, data integrity checks were coming back clean. Ethan ran one final verification sequence, then stood up slowly, his back aching from hunching over the terminal. Sophie, stay here for 1 second. He walked to the door and opened it. The entire engineering team was crowded in the hallway outside, watching through the glass walls like he was performing surgery. When they saw his face, conversation stopped. It's stable, Ethan said quietly. For approximately 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the hallway erupted. Questions flew at him from every direction. Victoria pushed through the crowd, staring at the monitors over his shoulder, watching the green status indicators like they might disappear if she looked away. How did you... The integration protocol you were using assumed synchronous handoffs, Ethan explained, too tired to make it simple. But your legacy system runs asynchronous batch processes. Every sync attempt created timing conflicts. I rebuilt the handoff layer to use event-driven triggers instead of scheduled syncs. It's not elegant, but it'll hold until you can properly refactor the entire integration. Victoria stared at him. 17 minutes. 11, actually. The rest was verification. Our consultants worked for 6 hours. Ethan shrugged. They were solving the wrong problem. Richard Peterson had his phone out, checking something. His face had gone pale. Ms. Hale, the data corruption. It's reversing. Client accounts are rebuilding from the clean backup states. I think we're going to be okay. The relief in the room was palpable. James Wen approached Ethan slowly, like someone approaching a miracle they didn't quite trust. How did you see it? In the interview, you only glimpsed the diagram for a second. I've built a lot of integration systems. You start to recognize the patterns that fail. Ethan rubbed his face. Look, I need to get my daughter home. It's almost 4 a.m. Wait! Victoria's voice stopped him. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Mr. Cole, there's something I need to check. Can you give me until morning, please? Ms. Hale, I have a 7-year-old who needs sleep and a maintenance job in 6 hours. I'll pay you for your time, double the consultation fee. I just need... She stopped, seemed to make a decision. I need to look into something, about you, about our company, please. Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to take Sophie home and forget this entire bizarre night, but something in Victoria's face made him hesitate. Fine, but I'm taking Sophie to a hotel nearby. You can call me when you're done with whatever you need to check. He gathered Sophie, who was fighting sleep despite the excitement. As they left, he caught fragments of conversation behind them. Who is this guy? Fixed in 11 minutes what our entire team couldn't. Where did he even come from? In the elevator, Sophie leaned against his side. Dad? Yeah, baby? You saved them, didn't you? Ethan thought about Victoria's face, about the morning's humiliation, about the way she'd looked at him like he was nothing. I fixed their computer, he said carefully. That's the same thing. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. They found a hotel 3 blocks away. Ethan got them a room, helped Sophie into bed, and then sat by the window watching the sky slowly lighten over Chicago. His phone buzzed at 6:23 a.m. Victoria Hale, we need to talk. In person, please. Another message followed immediately. Victoria Hale, I found something about you and Sterling Gate, something I think you'll want to see. Ethan stared at the messages. What could she possibly have found? He typed back, Sophie needs breakfast first, then I'll come. The response was instant. I'll have breakfast brought to your hotel. Room number? Ethan told her. 20 minutes later, a server from the hotel restaurant arrived with a cart loaded with food, pancakes, eggs, fresh fruit, juice, enough to feed a family of 6. Sophie's eyes went huge. Is this all for us? I guess so. They ate together at the small hotel room table, and Ethan tried to ignore the anxiety building in his chest. What had Victoria found? What could possibly connect him to Sterling Gate beyond one disastrous interview and one emergency fix? His phone buzzed again. Victoria Hale. Whenever you're ready, I'll come to you. Which was strange. CEOs didn't make house calls. Ethan. Give us 30 minutes. He helped Sophie clean up, made sure she had her tablet charged and her favorite shows queued up, then texted Victoria his room number. She arrived exactly 30 minutes later. Through the hotel room's peephole, Ethan could see her standing in the hallway looking oddly nervous. She'd changed clothes, still professional, but less severe than yesterday's suit, and she was carrying a large file box. He opened the door. Mr. Cole? She nodded to him, then looked past him to where Sophie sat on the bed. Hi there, I'm Victoria. Sophie, never one for shyness, waved. You're the lady from the building. I am. Is it okay if I talk to your dad for a few minutes? I guess. Sophie went back to her tablet. Victoria turned to Ethan. Can we sit? They sat at the small table. Victoria set the file box between them with a heaviness that seemed metaphorical as much as literal. Last night, after you fixed our system, I couldn't sleep. Her voice was quiet, controlled. I kept thinking about how you'd spotted the integration conflict, how you'd known exactly what was wrong. It seemed impossible for someone to just intuitively understand our architecture that completely. Ethan said nothing. So I went into our archives, the old records from when my father first founded Sterling Gate 23 years ago. She opened the file box. And I found something strange. She pulled out a thick folder yellowed with age. The label read, Core Systems Architecture, Confidential. My father always said he built Sterling Gate's original platform himself. Self-taught programmer, visionary designer. It was part of the company mythology. Victoria's hands were shaking slightly as she opened the folder. But that was a lie. She pulled out pages and pages of handwritten code documentation, architectural diagrams, system flowcharts, all meticulously detailed. And in the corner of every single page, in small, careful handwriting, E. Cole. Ethan's breath stopped. You, Victoria said softly. You built Sterling Gate, not my father. You. Ethan stared at his own handwriting from 20 years ago. The letters were smaller, more careful than how he wrote now, but unmistakably his. The same way he still documented systems, detailed, precise, obsessive about clarity. I don't understand. His voice came out rough. Where did you get these? Victoria was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. They were in a locked cabinet in my father's personal archive. Files marked for destruction after his death. She pulled out more pages. Every core system, every integration protocol, every optimization that made Sterling Gate profitable in those first 5 years, all documented by you. Sophie had looked up from her tablet, sensing the tension in the room even if she didn't understand it. Ethan's mind was racing backward, trying to piece together memories he'd deliberately buried. He'd been 19, young and stupid and convinced his code could change the world. Richard Hale had been, 40-something? An investment banker with big ideas and no technical knowledge? Your father hired me as a contractor, Ethan said slowly. This was before everything, before Sarah, before Sophie, before... He stopped. It was supposed to be a 6-month project. Build the core trading platform, implement the risk analysis systems, set up the infrastructure for scaling. Did he pay you? Barely. He kept saying the real money would come later, after the company took off. Partnership equity, profit sharing. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was 19. I believed him. Victoria pulled out another document. This one was a contract, faded with age. Ethan recognized his signature at the bottom, young and optimistic. According to this, you signed over all intellectual property rights in exchange for 5% equity in Sterling Gate Financial. I remember. Do you have your stock certificates? Ethan looked at her like she'd asked if he had a yacht. I never got any certificates. Your father said there were delays with the legal paperwork, then delays with the incorporation, then he stopped, the memory crystallizing. Then he stopped returning my calls. Victoria's expression was unreadable. When was this? 20 years ago. I was 19, almost 20. Sarah was pregnant. I needed steady work, not promises. Ethan rubbed his face. I tried to follow up for maybe 6 months, but Sterling Gate had moved to a bigger office. The phone number I had was disconnected, and I had a baby on the way and rent to pay, so I moved on. Moved on. Victoria repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. You built the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar company and then just moved on? What was I supposed to do? Hire a lawyer I couldn't afford to fight a case I'd probably lose? The old bitterness surprised him with its intensity. I was a kid with no degree, no credentials, no proof beyond some handwritten documentation that I'd been too young to know I should protect. Your father was a successful investment banker with connections and money. Who do you think would have won? Sophie had abandoned her tablet completely now, watching them with worried eyes. Victoria carefully stacked the documents back into the folder. Her hands were steady, but her voice wasn't. Last night, after you left, I called my father. He's retired, right? In Florida, golf and early bird specials. She said it with a flatness that suggested their relationship was complicated. I told him we'd had a systems crisis, told him someone named Ethan Cole had fixed it in 11 minutes. Asked him if the name meant anything. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did he say? He hung up on me, then called back 20 minutes later and told me to leave it alone. Said it was ancient history that didn't matter anymore. Victoria met his eyes. So I got on a plane at 5 this morning. I'm meeting him tomorrow, and I think you should come with me. What? He owes you answers, 20 years of answers. She leaned forward. Mr. Cole, Ethan, Sterling Gate is worth $4.3 billion. If you legitimately owned 5% of this company, that's over $200 million. The number was so absurd that Ethan almost laughed. I don't want his money. It's not his money, it's yours. I don't want it. He said it harder, and Sophie flinched at his tone. He lowered his voice. I fixed your system because people would have gotten hurt if I didn't. Client accounts, employee jobs, all of it. But I don't want anything from your father. He made his choice 20 years ago. I made mine. We both moved on. Victoria looked at him like he was speaking another language. You're not angry? Of course I'm angry. Ethan gestured at the documents between them. But anger doesn't pay rent. It doesn't put food on the table or shoes on my daughter's feet. I learned that a long time ago. So you just accepted it? Accepted that he stole your work? I accepted that fighting him would have destroyed me worse than walking away did. Ethan glanced at Sophie. Look, I appreciate you digging this up. I appreciate knowing I wasn't crazy, that I actually did build something that mattered. But I have a life now. It's not the life I wanted, but it's mine. And I'm not letting your father take anything else from me, including my peace. Victoria sat back and something flickered across her face. Disappointment, maybe. Or recognition. That's what my mother used to say. Her voice was quiet. About my father. That fighting him would cost more than losing to him. Ethan said nothing. She died when I was 16, cancer. Victoria was staring at the documents now, instead of at him. And my father threw himself into Sterling Gate like it was the only thing that mattered. Built this empire, this legacy. I spent my entire life trying to be worthy of it. Harvard MBA at 25, CEO at 28. Everything I did was about proving I deserved the Hale name. Why are you telling me this? Because yesterday I looked at you and saw someone beneath me. Someone not worth my time. She finally met his eyes again. And it turns out the company I've been killing myself to deserve was built by the man I dismissed as maintenance work. The silence stretched between them. Sophie broke it. Dad, can I have a snack? The question was so perfectly timed, so perfectly 7 years old, that both adults almost smiled. Yeah, baby, there's fruit in the basket over there. Sophie climbed off the bed and investigated the complimentary fruit basket with serious concentration, leaving the adults to their uncomfortable conversation. Come to Florida with me, Victoria said again. Not for the money, for the truth. Don't you want to hear him admit what he did? Ethan thought about 19-year-old him, staying up all night writing code and dreaming about partnership and future. Thought about 20-year-old him, trying to get Richard Hale on the phone while bouncing a crying newborn. Thought about all the years of maintenance work and scraped together rent, and telling himself it didn't matter, the past didn't matter. No, he said finally. I don't need to hear him say it. I already know what he did. Having him admit it won't change anything. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression tightened. The board wants an emergency meeting. They want to know how we survived last night. She stood, gathering the file box. I'm going to tell them the truth, that Ethan Cole saved us, and that Ethan Cole also built us 20 years ago. Don't? Why not? Because it won't matter to them either. Ethan stayed seated. They'll be grateful for last night. They might even offer me a job, but that 5% equity, that contract, your lawyers will bury it so deep that even if I wanted to fight, which I don't, I'd spend 10 years in court and lose everything trying. Victoria looked like she wanted to argue, but her phone buzzed again and again. I have to go. She paused at the door. The consulting fee, $20,000 for last night. It'll be in your account by Monday. That's too much. You saved a $4.3 billion company in 11 minutes. It's not nearly enough. She hesitated. The job offer stands too, senior systems architect. Name your salary. I need to think about it. Take your time. You have my direct number now. She looked past him to Sophie, who was methodically eating grapes one at a time. She's lucky to have a father who puts her first. Then Victoria was gone, leaving Ethan alone with his daughter and a file box full of 20-year-old ghosts. Sophie climbed back onto the bed. Is that lady still mean? No, I think she's just confused. About what? How did you explain corporate theft and buried legacies to a 7-year-old? Adult stuff. Nothing you need to worry about. But Sophie was studying his face with that unnerving perception that children sometimes had. You look sad. Just tired, baby. Are you sad about the papers? Ethan looked at the file box. A little bit. Those papers are about something I did a long time ago, before you were born, before your mom, and I guess I forgot that it mattered. Did you build something? Yeah. Something big? Turned out to be pretty big, yeah. Sophie thought about this seriously. Like the buildings you fix. Bigger, but also smaller. It's complicated. His phone rang. Ron Patterson. Cole, please tell me the rumors I'm hearing aren't true. Ethan put the call on speaker. What rumors? That you fixed Sterling Gate Financial's entire systems infrastructure in the middle of the night. That their CEO is personally calling you a genius. That they're offering you a job that would make my entire yearly salary look like pocket change. The rumors are pretty accurate. Ron was quiet for a long moment. You're leaving building services. I don't know yet. Ethan, I've had you on my roster for 4 years. You're the best systems guy I've got, and I say that knowing you're overqualified for 90% of what I send you to do. Ron's voice softened. But if Sterling Gate is offering you the moon, take it. Don't stay in maintenance work out of some misplaced loyalty to me. It's not about loyalty. It's about... Ethan stopped. What was it about? Stability? Fear? The comfort of knowing exactly what his life looked like, even if he hated it? It's about being scared shitless that you'll fail, Ron said bluntly. I get it. You've got Sophie. You've been barely holding on for years. The idea of risking that for something bigger is terrifying. When did you become a therapist? I've got 3 kids and an ex-wife. Therapy's a survival skill. Ron sighed. Look, do what you need to do, but don't make decisions based on fear. You're too smart for that. The call ended. Sophie had abandoned the grapes and was now investigating the file box with curiosity. Can I see the papers? They're just boring work stuff. You always say that about your work, but then you fix things and people are happy. She pulled out one of the architectural diagrams, handling it carefully. This looks like a maze. It kind of is. A maze for information instead of people. Did you make the maze? Ethan looked at his daughter holding documentation of the work that had defined his young life and destroyed his naive belief in fairness. Yeah, baby. I made the maze. Then you're good at mazes. She said it with such simple confidence that Ethan felt something crack in his chest. They checked out of the hotel around noon. Ethan drove Sophie to the library, their Saturday tradition when he wasn't working, and tried to focus on helping her pick out new books instead of thinking about Victoria Hale flying to Florida to confront her father. Tried not to think about 19-year-old Ethan signing away his future for promises. Tried not to think about the job offer sitting in his inbox like a live grenade. His phone buzzed while Sophie was debating between two different chapter books. Text from a number he didn't recognize. Unknown. This is James Wen from Sterling Gate. Victoria gave me your number. I wanted to apologize for yesterday's interview. I knew something was wrong with the integration protocol but couldn't identify it. Watching you work last night was humbling. Ethan stared at the message. Another buzz. James Wen. Also wanted to say, if you take the job, I'll be working under you, and I'm okay with that. You're better at this than any of us. Ethan. I haven't decided about the job. James Wen. Fair. But for what it's worth, Sterling Gate needs you. Not as a fix-it guy, as the person who actually understands what we're building. Sophie appeared with 3 books instead of 2, having negotiated herself into an extra selection. Can I get all of them? Library books are free, troublemaker. Get as many as you want. They checked out, drove home, and spent the afternoon doing normal Saturday things. Laundry. Grocery shopping at the discount store. Helping their elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen carry her bags upstairs. Sophie did homework at the kitchen table while Ethan made dinner. Spaghetti, because it was cheap, and Sophie would actually eat it. Normal, comfortable, safe. His laptop sat closed on the counter, Victoria's job offer waiting inside. After Sophie went to bed, Ethan finally opened it. The email was professionally written, detailed, generous. Senior Systems Architect position. Base salary of $185,000 plus benefits and performance bonuses. Start date flexible. Reporting directly to the CEO. The salary alone was more than he'd made in the past 3 years combined. He should accept immediately. Should be grateful. Should recognize this for the life-changing opportunity it was. Instead, he closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen thinking about Richard Hale, about stolen credit and buried documentation, about companies built on other people's brilliance. His phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Victoria Hale. I'm in Florida, she said without preamble. Meeting my father tomorrow morning. Last chance to join me. I told you I don't need to hear his excuses. I need you to hear them. Her voice was strained. I've been running this company for 2 years thinking I earned it, thinking I was continuing my father's legacy, and now I find out the legacy was built on theft. I need someone else who knows to be there when he explains it. Ethan understood that feeling. The need for witness, for validation. Victoria, I have a daughter. I can't just fly to Florida. Bring her. I'll cover everything. Flights, hotel, meals, please. The word please from a CEO was strange enough to make him pause. Why does this matter so much to you? Because I humiliated you yesterday based on my father's lie. Because I've built my entire life around a company that wasn't what I thought it was. Because... She stopped. Because I'm 30 years old, and I'm realizing I don't actually know anything about the man who raised me. Ethan thought about Sophie sleeping in her room, about the stability he'd fought so hard to give her, about risks and safety and the difference between the two. If I come, Sophie comes, and we're back by Monday morning. She has school. Deal, I'll text you the flight information. Victoria? Yeah? This won't change anything. Whatever your father says, whatever he admits or doesn't admit, I'm still not fighting for that equity. I'm still not interested in revenge. I know. Her voice was quiet. But maybe we both need to hear the truth anyway. The flight left O'Hare at 6 a.m. Sunday morning. Sophie was excited about her first plane ride right up until the moment of takeoff, when she gripped Ethan's hand hard enough to hurt and buried her face against his shoulder. It's okay, baby. Just like a car, but higher up. Cars don't leave the ground, she said into his shirt. Fair point. Victoria had booked them first class, which was so far beyond Ethan's normal experience that he barely knew how to sit in the wide leather seat. Sophie recovered from her fear quickly enough and spent the flight fascinated by the flight attendants bringing them orange juice and snacks without being asked. Victoria was waiting at Tampa International, looking tired and tense. Thanks for coming. Where's your father? His condo in Clearwater, about 40 minutes from here. She glanced at Sophie. There's an arcade at the condo complex. I arranged for someone to stay with her during the meeting. I stay with my dad, Sophie said firmly. Victoria looked at Ethan. He shrugged. She stays with me. The drive to Clearwater was quiet. Victoria white-knuckled the steering wheel of the rental car. Sophie watched the palm trees and ocean views with wide eyes. Ethan tried to prepare himself for seeing Richard Hale again after 20 years. The condo complex was expensive in that Florida retirement way. Pristine landscaping, golf course views, residents in pastel colors driving golf carts. Richard Hale's unit overlooked the water. Victoria knocked instead of using her key. The man who answered was older than Ethan remembered, but not old. Mid-60s, still fit, tanned from the Florida sun. His eyes went straight to Ethan, and something flickered there. Recognition, guilt, defensiveness. Victoria, I told you this wasn't necessary. It's very necessary. Victoria walked past him into the condo. Ethan and Sophie followed. The interior was decorated with the kind of impersonal wealth that came from having money but not much taste. Leather furniture, abstract art, windows overlooking a small private beach. Richard Hale stared at Ethan for a long moment, then looked at Sophie. Your daughter? Yeah. She looks like you. Richard gestured at the couch. Sit. I assume Victoria told you what she found. They sat. Sophie pressed close to Ethan's side, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. Victoria remained standing, arms crossed. Dad, tell him what you did. I think he already knows what I did. Then say it anyway. Richard Hale poured himself a drink from the bar cart, scotch, expensive, the kind of casual day drinking that came with retirement. 23 years ago, I had an idea for a financial trading platform. I had the business knowledge, the industry connections, the capital. What I didn't have was technical expertise. So you hired me, Ethan said flatly. I hired a 19-year-old kid who was brilliant with systems architecture and desperate enough to work for equity instead of real money. Richard took a drink. You built everything, the core platform, the integration protocols, the risk analysis systems, 6 months of work that became the foundation of Sterling Gate. And then you cut him out, Victoria said. I protected the company. Richard's voice hardened. 6 months into the launch, I discovered a critical flaw in the core code. Something that could have crashed the entire system, wiped out client accounts, destroyed us before we'd even started. I panicked. I didn't know how to fix it, and I was terrified that if investors found out we'd built the company on faulty architecture, we'd lose everything. Ethan's hands had gone cold. What flaw? A timing vulnerability in the transaction processing layer. Under high load, the system would have started corrupting data. Richard looked at Ethan directly for the first time. You found it before I did. Called me at 2 a.m, told me you'd identified the problem and had a solution. You fixed it that same night. The memory was surfacing now, hazy with time. Ethan remembered that call, remembered the panic in Richard's voice, remembered staying up all night rebuilding the transaction system while Sarah slept in the next room, 8 months pregnant. I fixed it for free, Ethan said slowly. You said it was part of the original contract. It wasn't. And after you fixed it, I realized something. Richard sat down heavily. You were the only person who understood the Sterling Gate systems completely. Every critical component had your fingerprints on it. If you ever decided to leave, or worse, if you ever decided you wanted more than 5% equity, you could have held the entire company hostage. Victoria made a sound like she'd been hit. So you erased him, she said. You buried his documentation, cut off his calls, made sure nobody knew he'd built the company. I protected Sterling Gate from single point of failure risk. Richard said it like a business decision, cold and logical. Within a year, I'd hired a team of engineers and had them rebuild the systems using Ethan's architecture as a template. Same functionality, different implementation. By the time Sterling Gate went public, there was nothing left that required Ethan Cole specifically. Ethan felt numb. The 5% equity. Never formalized. The contracts you signed had clauses about completion milestones and vesting schedules. You didn't meet the technical requirements for vesting. Richard drained his scotch. My lawyers made sure of that. You stole from him, Victoria said. Her voice was shaking. You stole his work, his legacy, his future. And then you spent 20 years letting me believe you were some kind of visionary founder. I built Sterling Gate into what it is today. The initial architecture was important, but it was just the foundation. I'm the one who grew it, scaled it, turned it into a billion-dollar company. Richard looked at Ethan. I'm not proud of how I handled it. If I could go back, I'd do things differently. But I can't. And what's done is done. The condo went silent except for the sound of waves through the open balcony door. Sophie, who'd been quiet through the whole conversation, suddenly spoke up. You're a bad man. 3 pairs of adult eyes turned to her. Sophie, Ethan started. No, he is. He took Dad's maze and said it was his. She glared at Richard Hale with 7-year-old fury. That's stealing. That's what bullies do. Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. Victoria sat down slowly, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. All my life I thought I had to earn the Hale name. Thought I had to prove I was smart enough, tough enough, worthy enough to run your company. She looked at her father. And it turns out the company was never really yours to begin with. Victoria, no, I'm done. She stood back up. Ethan, the job offer is still open, senior systems architect, but I'm adding something to it. I'm giving you 5% equity in Sterling Gate. Not as compensation. You'd need lawyers and years to fight for that, but as the right thing to do. Victoria, you can't just, Richard started. I'm the CEO. I can do whatever the board approves. And I think when I explain to them that the man who saved us Friday night is the same man who built us 23 years ago, they'll approve. She looked at Ethan. It's not the equity you should have had. That would be worth over $200 million now. But 5% of current valuation is still over $200 million. It's yours if you want it. Ethan couldn't breathe. $200 million. Financial security for Sophie forever. College fully funded. A house, a car, everything he'd struggled to provide. All he had to do was accept. But accepting meant being tied to Sterling Gate forever. Meant being connected to Richard Hale's theft and Victoria's guilt and a company built on his stolen work. Meant Sophie growing up knowing her father had been bought off instead of standing on principle. I need time, Ethan heard himself say, to think about all of it. The job, the equity, everything. Victoria nodded. Take the time you need. Richard Hale set down his empty glass. Ethan, for what it's worth, I am sorry. What I did was wrong. I knew it was wrong even then. I wanted to protect what I'd built, even if I'd built it on someone else's foundation. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I know. They left shortly after. Sophie held Ethan's hand tight as they walked back to the rental car, and once they were inside, she burst into tears. Baby, what's wrong? That man was mean to you and you didn't yell at him. She sobbed into her hands. You should have yelled at him. Ethan pulled her into his lap, not caring about seatbelts or proper car seats. Sometimes yelling doesn't fix things. But he was bad. He stole from you. Yeah, he did. Then why didn't you yell? How did you explain to a 7-year-old that some battles weren't worth fighting? That anger was exhausting and revenge was empty and sometimes the best you could do was survive? Because yelling at him won't give me back 20 years, Ethan said softly. It won't change what he did. It'll just make me tired and sad. Sophie cried harder, and Ethan held her while Victoria sat in the driver's seat pretending not to listen. Finally, Sophie's tears slowed. Are you going to take the job? I don't know yet. The lady seems nicer now. Yeah, she does. And we could get a bigger apartment with 2 bedrooms. Ethan's heart broke a little. Sophie had never complained about sharing the single bedroom, about sleeping on a mattress on the floor while Ethan took the pull-out couch. But of course she'd noticed. Maybe, he said. We'll see. The flight back to Chicago was quiet. Sophie fell asleep against the window. Victoria worked on her laptop across the aisle. Ethan stared at the clouds below and thought about choices and consequences and the difference between justice and peace. His phone had service again when they landed at O'Hare. 17 missed calls, dozens of texts. They were all from news outlets, tech blogs, financial reporters. What the hell? Ethan scrolled through them, confused. Victoria checked her own phone and went pale. Oh no. What? She showed him her screen. Bloomberg News posted 2 hours earlier. Sterling Gate CEO reveals company founded on stolen code. Billionaire's daughter exposes father's theft of young programmer's work. The article had everything. Victoria's discovery of the old documentation. Richard Hale's admission of cutting Ethan out. Even quotes from Victoria about making it right. Someone had leaked the story. I didn't. Victoria looked stricken. I didn't tell anyone. My father must have. Her phone rang. She answered it, listened for 10 seconds, then hung up. The board wants an emergency meeting. First thing tomorrow morning. They're furious. Why are they furious? Your father's the one who built a multi-billion-dollar company that's now facing potential lawsuits, reputation damage, and questions about the validity of our foundational IP. Victoria rubbed her face. This is a disaster. Ethan's phone was still buzzing. Another reporter. Another request for comment. He turned it off. What are you going to do? Victoria asked. Take my daughter home, make dinner, read her a bedtime story. Ethan stood, gathering their bags. The rest of it can wait until tomorrow. Ethan, tomorrow, Victoria. I can't think about any of this right now. They took a cab back to his apartment building. Sophie woke up enough to climb the stairs herself, still groggy and confused. Ethan unlocked their door and felt a wave of relief at being somewhere familiar and safe. Normal dinner, normal bedtime routine, normal goodnight kiss. Dad? Sophie's voice was sleepy. Are we going to be okay? Always, baby. I promise. Even with all the scary stuff happening, even with that. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the trip and the emotions. Ethan sat in the dark kitchen and finally turned his phone back on. 63 missed calls, and one text message from a number he didn't recognize. Unknown. This is Richard Peterson from Sterling Gate. I leaked the story. Victoria's father has spent 20 years taking credit for your work. The world deserves to know the truth. Whatever happens next, you have allies here. Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Lawyers, reporters, decisions he wasn't ready to make. But tonight, he was just Ethan Cole, single father, maintenance worker, barely holding on. And for now, that was enough. Monday morning arrived with reporters camped outside Ethan's apartment building. He discovered them at 6:15 a.m. when he went to take out the trash and found 3 news vans parked illegally on the street. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward like accusing fingers. A woman in a pantsuit spotted him immediately. Mr. Cole, can you comment on the allegations that Richard Hale stole your intellectual property? Ethan dropped the trash bag and retreated back inside so fast he nearly tripped over the stairs. His heart was hammering. Through the narrow window beside the door, he could see more of them gathering, cameras, microphones, people with notebooks. Dad? Sophie appeared in the hallway, already dressed for school in the clothes he'd laid out the night before. What's happening? Nothing, baby. Just some people who want to talk to me. About the maze? Yeah, about the maze. Ethan locked the door and added the chain for good measure, then pulled out his phone. 17 new missed calls since he'd gone to sleep. Most from numbers he didn't recognize, but 3 from Victoria Hale. He called her back. She answered before the first ring finished. Ethan, thank God. Are you okay? I have reporters outside my building. I know. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to become public. The board is in damage control mode and they're... She stopped. Can you get to Sterling Gate? We need to talk. In person. Away from the cameras. I can't leave. They'll follow me. And Sophie has school. I'll send a car. Tinted windows. Driver who knows how to lose a tail. And I'll arrange for Sophie to have a private escort to school. Security, the whole thing. Ethan looked at his daughter, who was watching him with worried eyes while eating a bowl of cereal. This is insane. I know, but it's happening. Please, let me help. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the alley behind Ethan's building. The driver, a woman in her 40s with the calm competence of former military, introduced herself as Carmen and told them to get low in the back seat while she drove. Sophie thought it was an adventure right up until they passed the reporters, who swarmed the vehicle shouting questions. Then she grabbed Ethan's hand hard enough to hurt. Why are they so mad? They're not mad, baby. They just want a story. About you? About something that happened a long time ago. Carmen drove like she'd done this before, taking random turns and doubling back until she was satisfied they weren't being followed. She dropped Sophie at her school first. A security guard Victoria had hired was waiting at the entrance, discreet but present. "I'll be right here when school ends," the guard said. He was young, friendly, the kind of person who looked like he should be coaching Little League instead of providing security. "Make sure you get home safe." Sophie looked at Ethan. "Is this because of the bad man?" "This is just to keep you safe while the reporters are being annoying." "Okay." She hugged him tight. "Don't let them be mean to you." "I won't, troublemaker. Have a good day at school." Watching her walk into the building with her star-covered backpack made Ethan's chest ache. This was supposed to be a normal Monday. Math worksheets and spelling tests and sharing snacks at lunch. Not security guards and media circuses and her father's buried past exploding into the present. Carmen drove him to Sterling Gate through the employee garage entrance, bypassing the main lobby where more reporters had apparently gathered. The elevator took them straight to the executive floor without stopping. Victoria was waiting when the doors opened. She looked like she hadn't slept. Same clothes from yesterday. Hair pulled back in a messy knot. Makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion. "Conference room, now, before the board gets here." She led him to the same glass-walled room where she'd dismissed him last Thursday. It felt like a lifetime ago. James Wen was already inside, along with Richard Peterson and two other people Ethan didn't recognize. A woman in an expensive suit and a man who had lawyer written all over him. "Ethan Cole, meet Margaret Chen, our general counsel, and David Rourke from our PR firm." Victoria gestured at the chairs. "Sit. We have about 15 minutes before the board arrives and everything gets worse." Ethan sat. "Worse than reporters camping outside my apartment?" "Much worse." Margaret Chen opened a thick folder. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct. The story that broke last night has created significant legal exposure for Sterling Gate. We're facing potential lawsuits from shareholders, questions about the validity of our IP portfolio, and regulatory scrutiny from the SEC. I didn't leak the story. We know. Richard Peterson did." She said it matter-of-factly without judgment. "He thought he was helping. Instead, he's created a situation where everything depends on how you respond." David Rourke leaned forward. He had the smooth face and practiced calm of someone who managed crises for a living. "Right now, Mr. Cole, you're the story. Brilliant programmer screwed over by wealthy founder discovers his stolen legacy 20 years later. It's compelling, the media loves it, and what you do next determines whether this destroys Sterling Gate or becomes a redemption narrative." "I don't want to be a narrative." "Too late. You already are." Rourke pulled out his tablet, showing Ethan a dozen headlines. They all said variations of the same thing. "Tech genius robbed, billionaire's dirty secret, the programmer who built an empire and got nothing." One article had found an old photo of Ethan from his early 20s, back when he'd done some freelance work that required a headshot. He looked impossibly young in it, optimistic in a way that made his current self want to look away. "The board meets in 10 minutes, Victoria said. "They're going to ask me to fix this, and the only way to fix this is with your cooperation." "What kind of cooperation?" Margaret Chen pulled out a document. "We're prepared to offer you a settlement, $10 million, immediate payment, in exchange for signing an NDA and releasing any claims against Sterling Gate or Richard Hale." The number hung in the air like a grenade. $10 million. "That's generous," Ethan heard himself say. "It's not generous. It's strategic." Chen's expression was neutral, professional. "A protracted legal battle would cost us more in legal fees and reputation damage. 10 million makes you go away quietly." "And if I don't go away quietly?" "Then we fight. And we win, because the contracts you signed 20 years ago were ironclad. Richard Hale's lawyers made sure of that." She closed the folder. "But fighting means years of litigation, massive legal bills you probably can't afford, and a very public trial where every detail of your life gets examined, including your financial struggles, your ex-wife abandoning you, every maintenance job you've worked. They'll make you look desperate and unreliable." Ethan's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the table. "You're threatening me." "I'm explaining reality." Chen's voice softened slightly. "Mr. Cole, I've reviewed the original contracts. Richard Hale was thorough. Even if you had unlimited resources to fight this, your chances of winning are slim. 10 million is more than fair compensation for something you'd likely never recover in court." Victoria was staring at the table, her jaw tight. Richard Peterson looked sick. James Wen finally spoke up. "This is bullshit." Everyone turned to look at him.
"James," Victoria started. "No, it's bullshit." He stood up, agitated. Ethan saved this company twice. Once when he built it, once when he fixed it Friday night. And now we're going to pay him to disappear? Make him sign papers saying he'll never talk about the fact that Sterling Gate was founded on theft? "We're protecting the company," Chen said.
"We're protecting Richard Hale's reputation. There's a difference." James looked at Ethan. "Don't take the money. Fight them. I'll testify on your behalf. I'll tell everyone that you're the best systems architect I've ever seen and that this company owes you everything." "James, sit down." Victoria's voice was sharp. "You're not helping." "I'm the only one helping. The rest of you are trying to bury this the same way Richard Hale buried Ethan 20 years ago." The conference room door opened. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed stepped inside. "The board is ready." Victoria stood. "Ethan, you don't have to decide right now. Think about the settlement. Talk to a lawyer if you want. But please, don't talk to the reporters. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because anything you say publicly becomes ammunition. For them or against them, I don't know yet. But once you speak, you can't take it back." Ethan watched her leave with the others. James Wen paused at the door, looked back. "You deserve better than hush money." Then he was gone too, and Ethan sat alone in the glass-walled conference room where this had all started. His phone buzzed. Text from Carmen. "Waiting in the garage whenever you're ready." Another buzz. Unknown number. "Mr. Cole, this is Amanda Peters from the New York Times. I'd like to discuss your experience with Richard Hale and Sterling Gate. I promise fair coverage." Another. CNN. "Business requesting interview." Another. "Legal representation available, contingency basis, experienced in IP theft cases." Ethan turned the phone off and pressed his palms against his eyes. $10 million. He could buy a house, a real house, with a yard where Sophie could play, could set up a college fund that would cover any school she wanted, could stop worrying about rent and bills and whether his car would last another year. All he had to do was sign papers saying he'd never tell anyone what Richard Hale had done. The door opened again. This time it was Victoria, alone. "The board wants you to take the settlement." She sat down across from him. "They think it's the cleanest solution. Pay you enough that you'd be crazy to refuse, make the story go away." "What do you want?" "Honestly, I don't know anymore." Victoria rubbed her face. 3 days ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what I was doing. Now I find out my entire career is built on my father's theft, and the man I dismissed as maintenance work is actually the person who made all of this possible. That's not an answer. The answer is, I want to do the right thing, but I don't know what the right thing is. She met his eyes. "If you take the settlement, this goes away. Sterling Gate survives. My father's reputation takes a hit, but not a fatal one. And you get more money than most people see in a lifetime. And if I don't take it, then it depends on what you do instead. If you sue, we fight, and probably win, and you end up with nothing but legal debt. If you go public with your story, you become a symbol, the little guy screwed over by corporate greed. You'll get sympathy, but not necessarily justice. Either way, Sterling Gate gets dragged through years of scrutiny." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You're trying to convince me to take the money." "I'm trying to be honest about the options." Victoria's voice was tired. "Ethan, my father is a bastard. What he did to you was wrong, but Sterling Gate employs 3,000 people now, good people who had nothing to do with what happened 20 years ago. If this company collapses, they all lose their jobs, their health insurance, their mortgages and car payments and kids' college funds. So I should take the money to protect people I've never met? No. You should take the money because fighting a battle you'll probably lose will destroy you worse than my father already did." She stood up. "I'll give you until tomorrow to decide. Talk to Sophie, talk to a lawyer, talk to anyone you trust. But Ethan, think about what you're really fighting for. Is it justice? Is it revenge? Or is it just the principle of not letting them win?" She left before he could answer. Carmen drove Ethan home through back streets, avoiding the main roads where reporters might be waiting. His apartment building was still surrounded when they arrived, but Carmen pulled into the alley and helped him get inside through the back entrance. "Miss Hale said I should stay nearby in case you need anything," Carmen offered. "I'm fine, but thank you." His apartment felt different now. Smaller, shabbier, but also safer. This was his space, his life, the thing he'd built without Richard Hale or Sterling Gate or anyone else's help. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his notebook, the same one where he'd sketched the system's integration problem that had started all of this. $10 million. He wrote the number down, stared at it, tried to imagine what that kind of money meant. Financial security for Sophie forever. No more maintenance jobs, no more scraping together rent, no more anxiety at 3 a.m. about bills he couldn't pay. But also silence. Agreement. Accepting that what happened to him didn't matter as long as the price was right. His phone, turned back on despite his better judgment, rang. Ron Patterson. Cole, I've been trying to reach you all morning. Sorry, it's been complicated. I'm watching the news. They're saying Richard Hale stole your work 20 years ago. Is that true? Yeah. Ron was quiet for a moment. Jesus, Ethan, I'm sorry. I had no idea. Nobody did. That was kind of the point. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Sterling Gate offered me a settlement, $10 million to sign an NDA and walk away. Ron whistled. That's life-changing money. That's what everyone keeps saying. But you're not sure you want to take it. Ethan rubbed his eyes. I spent 20 years convinced that what happened to me didn't matter, that I should just move on, focus on surviving, stop dwelling on the past. And I did. I survived. I raised Sophie. I made a life even if it wasn't the life I wanted. And now? Now everyone knows what Richard Hale did. The truth is out there, and they're offering me money to pretend it doesn't matter again. Does it matter? The question sat there, heavy and uncomfortable. I don't know, Ethan admitted. I keep thinking about 19-year-old me, staying up all night writing code and believing my work would change the world. What would that kid think if he knew I took hush money? That kid didn't have Sophie to worry about. No, he didn't. Look, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that pride doesn't pay rent, and $10 million would give Sophie opportunities that kid version of you never had. The call ended, and Ethan sat alone with his thoughts until it was time to pick Sophie up from school. The security guard, his name was Marcus, Ethan learned, had Sophie safely in the building's lobby when Ethan arrived. She ran to him immediately. Dad, there were people with cameras at school. Mrs. Rodriguez said they weren't allowed on the playground, but they were trying to take pictures through the fence. Ethan's blood went cold. Are you okay? I'm fine. Marcus told them to leave, and they did. She looked up at the security guard with admiration. He was really scary. Marcus smiled apologetically. Just doing my job. But Mr. Cole, you might want to talk to the school about increasing their security until this settles down. Back at the apartment, Ethan made Sophie her favorite dinner, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, and tried to act like everything was normal. But Sophie wasn't fooled. Dad, why do all those people care about your maze? Ethan sat down across from her. Remember how I told you the man in Florida stole my work? The bad man. Yeah, him. Well, now everyone knows what he did, and people think that's interesting because he's rich and famous and I'm not. Sophie thought about this seriously while eating her mac and cheese. Are you going to be rich and famous now? I don't know, maybe. They offered me money to stop talking about it. How much money? A lot. Enough that we could move to a bigger apartment with your own bedroom, and you could do gymnastics like you've wanted to. Sophie's eyes went huge. Really? Really? Then you should take it, she bounced in her seat. Dad, take the money. Then we can get a puppy too. Ethan couldn't help but laugh. I don't think we're getting a puppy. But my own bedroom? Yeah, your own bedroom. Sophie threw her arms around him, and Ethan held her tight while his mind spun. She was 7. She deserved stability and opportunities, and a childhood that wasn't defined by her father's financial struggles. She deserved to not worry about whether they had pizza money or if her shoes would last another month. $10 million would give her all of that. After Sophie went to bed, Ethan pulled out his laptop and started researching lawyers. Not to fight Sterling Gate, he believed Margaret Chen when she said the contracts were solid, but to review the settlement offer. Make sure there weren't any traps buried in the legalese. His email inbox was drowning in interview requests, legal offers, and messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. He deleted most of them without reading, but one message made him stop. The sender was listed as Sarah Cole, his ex-wife. He stared at her name for a full minute before opening it. Ethan, I saw the news. I can't believe what happened to you. I always knew you were brilliant, but I never realized what you'd actually built. I'm in Portland now, doing better, seeing someone. I've been thinking about Sophie lately, about how I left. I'd like to talk if you're open to it. No pressure, just wanted to reach out. Sarah. Ethan read the message 3 times, feeling nothing. Not anger, not longing, not even curiosity. Sarah had made her choice 4 years ago. She'd walked away from Sophie without a fight, sent sporadic child support payments when she remembered, and called on birthdays about half the time. Now she was reaching out because his name was in the news. He deleted the message without responding. His phone rang at 11:34 p.m. Victoria Hale. I told you I'd give you until tomorrow to decide. I know. I'm not calling about the settlement. She sounded strange. Turn on CNN. Ethan found the remote, switched on the small TV mounted above his kitchen counter. CNN Business was running a segment with the headline, Sterling Gate Scandal, the programmer who built a billion-dollar company. But it wasn't just talking heads discussing the story. They had Richard Hale on screen, being interviewed from his Florida condo. Mr. Hale, there are allegations that you stole the intellectual property that became Sterling Gate Financial. How do you respond? Richard looked tired but composed. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what happened 23 years ago. Yes, I hired Ethan Cole as a contractor. Yes, he did excellent work. But the idea of characterizing him as the founder of Sterling Gate is absurd. He was one of many contributors to our early systems. Important, certainly, but not irreplaceable. Ethan's hands clenched around the phone. The interviewer pressed on. But documents show that Mr. Cole designed the core architecture. Documents show that Mr. Cole worked on initial prototypes. But those prototypes were heavily modified by our engineering team. The Sterling Gate that exists today bears very little resemblance to what Mr. Cole built. To suggest otherwise diminishes the work of hundreds of talented engineers who've contributed over the years. What about the equity agreement? Reports say you promised him 5% of the company. There was a preliminary agreement that included performance milestones. Mr. Cole completed some of the milestones, but not others. When he chose to pursue other opportunities, we parted ways amicably, or so I thought. The interviewer shifted. Your daughter, Victoria Hale, who's currently Sterling Gate's CEO, has publicly stated that she discovered your theft of Mr. Cole's work. How do you respond to your own daughter contradicting your version of events? Richard's face hardened. My daughter is young and idealistic. She found some old paperwork and jumped to conclusions without understanding the full context. I love Victoria, but she's allowing emotion to cloud her judgment. He's lying. Ethan said it out loud, to the empty apartment, to Victoria on the phone. He's on national television lying about what happened. I know, Victoria's voice was tight. He called me an hour ago, said he wouldn't let me destroy the company over my guilt complex about privilege, said he built Sterling Gate and he won't apologize for protecting it. On screen, Richard Hale was still talking, still reframing history, still making himself the visionary founder and Ethan the disgruntled contractor. This is going to make everything worse, isn't it? Ethan asked. Yes. The board is panicking. They think my father going public makes you more likely to reject the settlement and sue, which means they're preparing to increase the offer. To how much? 20 million? Maybe more. Victoria sighed. Ethan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you make your decision. Okay. I'm stepping down as CEO. Ethan sat up straight. What? I can't run a company built on my father's theft. I can't stand in front of employees and investors and pretend I don't know the truth. And I can't, her voice cracked. I can't look at you and know that everything I am professionally exists because of what was stolen from you. Victoria B. Let me finish. I'm stepping down, but before I do, I'm using my authority as CEO to grant you the 5% equity I promised, not as a settlement, as what you're owed. The board will fight it, but I don't care. It's the right thing to do. The board will fire you. Probably, but at least I'll be able to live with myself. She paused. I'm also recommending you as my replacement. Ethan laughed, sharp and bitter. You can't be serious. You built this company. You saved it Friday night. You understand the systems better than anyone. Why shouldn't you run it? Because I have a 7-year-old daughter and a high school diploma and no interest in corporate politics. Fair points, Victoria's voice softened. But think about it. If you're CEO, you control the narrative. You decide what Sterling Gate becomes next. You turn it into the company it should have been from the beginning. I don't want to be CEO. Then what do you want? Ethan looked around his small apartment, at Sophie's drawings taped to the refrigerator, at the second-hand furniture and the water stain on the ceiling he kept meaning to fix, at the life he'd built from nothing after Richard Hale had taken everything. I want Sophie to be safe. I want to sleep through the night without worrying about money. He stopped. I want what was taken from me, but I don't think that exists anymore. It's been too long. So take the settlement, take the money, give Sophie the life she deserves, and let your father win? He already won 20 years ago. This is just deciding how much the victory costs him. The CNN interview was ending. Richard Hale was shaking the interviewer's hand, looking calm and confident and completely at peace with his lies. I'll give you my answer tomorrow, Ethan said. But Victoria, don't step down yet. Not until this is settled. Why not? Because if you step down now, it looks like you're running away. Like you're admitting your father was right, and he wasn't right. He was a thief. Then help me prove it. Take the CEO position. Fix this company from the inside. I can't. Why not? Because I'm not the person I was 20 years ago. That kid who built your father's company, he was naive and ambitious and believed hard work mattered more than connections. I'm not him anymore. I'm just tired. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Okay, but Ethan, whatever you decide, don't let my father make you feel like you're the one who needs to compromise. You're the victim here, not him. The call ended. Ethan sat in the dark kitchen until his eyes hurt from staring at nothing. Then he pulled out his notebook and started writing. Not code this time, just thoughts, consequences, the branching paths of different decisions. Take the settlement. Sophie gets security. Ethan gets peace. Richard Hale gets to rewrite history. Sterling Gate survives. The truth becomes a footnote in a business scandal that people forget in 6 months. Refuse the settlement. Fight in court for years, probably lose, end up broke and exhausted. Or go public with his story, become a symbol of corporate theft, spend the rest of his life defined by what was taken from him instead of what he built after. Accept the CEO position. Try to fix Sterling Gate from the inside. Give meaning to the theft by making the company into something better. But also chain himself to the place that represented his biggest failure. Spend every day reminded of what Richard Hale had stolen. None of the options were good. All of them required sacrifice. At 2:17 a.m., Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes. Dad? Why are you still awake? Just thinking, baby. Go back to bed. I can't sleep. I keep hearing voices outside. Ethan went to the window and looked down at the street. The news vans were gone, but a few photographers with long lenses were still stationed on the corner, waiting for something worth shooting. They're just doing their jobs. They'll go away soon. Sophie climbed into his lap, something she was getting almost too big to do. Dad, are you sad about the bad man on TV? You should be asleep. I woke up when I heard the TV. He was lying, wasn't he? About your maze? Ethan held his daughter closer. Yeah, he was lying. Are you going to tell everyone the truth? I don't know. It's complicated. Truth isn't complicated. Mrs. Rodriguez says you either tell the truth or you don't. Mrs. Rodriguez is right, but sometimes telling the truth costs more than people can afford to pay. Sophie was quiet for a moment, processing this with 7-year-old seriousness. Then she looked up at him with those huge dark eyes. Is the truth worth more than my bedroom? And there it was, the question that cut through all the complexity. Was justice worth more than his daughter's security? Was principle worth more than peace? Was the truth worth more than a bedroom for Sophie? I don't know, baby, Ethan whispered. I really don't know. Sophie fell asleep in his arms sometime around 3, her breath warm and steady against his chest. Ethan carried her back to bed and tucked her in, then stood watching her sleep in the dim light filtering through the window. She looked peaceful, unburdened by the weight of decisions that had nothing to do with her but would shape her entire future. He went back to the kitchen and made the call before he could talk himself out of it. Victoria answered on the second ring, sounding wide awake despite the hour. "Ethan? I'm not taking the settlement." Silence on the other end. Then, "Okay, can I ask why?" "Because Sophie asked me if the truth was worth more than her bedroom. And I realized that if I take the money, I'm teaching her that everything has a price, that you can buy silence, buy forgiveness, buy the right to rewrite history." Ethan leaned against the counter. "I don't want her to learn that. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. But not that." Victoria exhaled slowly. "The board is going to lose their minds. Let them. I'm tired of making decisions based on what powerful people want me to do." He paused. "But I'm also not taking the CEO position. I meant what I said. I'm not interested in running Sterling Gate." "Then what do you want?" Ethan thought about it. Really thought about it for the first time since this whole thing started. "I want Richard Hale to admit what he did, publicly. No spin, no reframing, just the truth. He'll never do that voluntarily. Then I'll make him do it involuntarily. I'm going on record. I'll tell my story to whoever will listen. Every detail of what happened 20 years ago, every lie he's told since, and I'll keep telling it until the cost of his reputation damage exceeds the cost of telling the truth. That could take months, years, and you still might not win. I know, but at least I'll be able to look Sophie in the eye and tell her I didn't sell out." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both." Ethan rubbed his face. "I'll need a lawyer. A good one. Someone who won't back down when Sterling Gate's legal team comes after me." "I know someone. Civil rights attorney, specializes in David versus Goliath cases. She's expensive, but she works on contingency for the right cases. Can you send me her information?" "Already texting it to you." Victoria paused. "Ethan, once you do this, there's no going back. Sterling Gate's lawyers will come at you with everything. They'll dig into your finances, your personal life, your relationship with Sophie's mother. They'll try to make you look unstable, unreliable, vindictive." "I know." "And you're still doing it?" "Yeah, I'm still doing it." "Then I'm going public too. Tomorrow morning, I'm holding a press conference. I'm going to tell everyone exactly what I found in my father's archives, and I'm going to back up every word you say." "Victoria, you don't have to choke." "Yes, I do. Because you're right. This isn't about money or settlements or protecting the company. It's about the truth. And I've spent my whole life believing a lie." Her voice hardened with something that sounded like resolve. "My father built his empire on theft. I won't build mine on silence." The call ended and Ethan sat in the dark kitchen feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope. Hope was too fragile, too naive. But maybe determination. Maybe the simple clarity of knowing what needed to be done, even if doing it was terrifying. He didn't sleep. Instead, he spent the hours before dawn writing. Everything he remembered about working with Richard Hale. Every conversation, every broken promise, every detail that might matter. His handwriting got messier as exhaustion set in, but he kept going until the first gray light appeared through the windows. At 6:30 a.m., Sophie wandered into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. "Dad, did you sleep?" "Not really." "Are you okay?" Ethan looked at his daughter, this small, fierce person who somehow believed he could fix anything, and felt his resolve solidify. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay. I made a decision about something important." "About the money?" "About the truth. I'm going to tell everyone what really happened, even if it's hard, even if it takes a long time." Sophie climbed onto the chair beside him and looked at the pages of notes scattered across the table. "Because of what I said? About the bedroom? Partly. But mostly because you deserve to grow up knowing that some things matter more than money." He pulled her close. "Even really comfortable bedrooms." She grinned. "Can we still get the bedroom eventually? We'll see what happens." At 7:15, Ethan's phone rang. Margaret Chen from Sterling Gate's legal team. "Mr. Cole, I understand you've declined the settlement offer." "That's right. I'd like to strongly encourage you to reconsider. The offer has been increased to $25 million. That's our final—" "I'm not interested." Chen's professional tone cracked slightly. "Mr. Cole, I don't think you understand the position you're putting yourself in. If you refuse this settlement and attempt to pursue legal action, we will defend this company with every resource at our disposal. Your life will become very difficult very quickly. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Sterling Gate has retained 3 of the top litigation firms in the country. We will challenge every claim you make, depose everyone you've ever known, and ensure that this process takes years and costs you everything you have. Ethan felt his anger rising but kept his voice level. Then I guess I'll see you in court. Mr. Cole? He hung up. Sophie was watching him with worried eyes. That lady sounded mean. She's just doing her job, but so am I. At 8 a.m., Victoria's press conference began. Ethan watched it on his phone while making Sophie breakfast. Victoria stood behind a podium in Sterling Gate's main conference room, looking composed but exhausted. Behind her sat James Wen, Richard Peterson, and several other executives Ethan didn't recognize. The room was packed with reporters. Thank you all for coming, Victoria began. I'm here today to address the allegations regarding Sterling Gate's founding and my father's relationship with programmer Ethan Cole. The room went silent. After conducting a thorough review of our company archives, I have confirmed that the allegations are true. 23 years ago, my father Richard Hale hired Ethan Cole to build the core systems architecture that became Sterling Gate Financial. Mr. Cole completed this work and was promised 5% equity in the company. My father then systematically cut Mr. Cole out, buried his contributions, and took sole credit for work he did not do. A reporter shouted a question, but Victoria kept talking. This is not speculation. This is documented fact. I have reviewed contracts, architectural diagrams, code documentation, all bearing Mr. Cole's signature and handwriting. Sterling Gate Financial was built on stolen intellectual property, and my father has spent 2 decades lying about it. The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction. Cameras flashed. Victoria raised her hand for silence. I'm also announcing my resignation as CEO, effective immediately. I cannot in good conscience continue to lead a company founded on theft. The board will appoint an interim CEO while they search for my permanent replacement. More chaos. More shouting. Finally, I'm using my remaining authority to grant Ethan Cole the 5% equity he was originally promised. This is not a settlement. This is what he's owed. The board may challenge this decision, but it's the right thing to do, and I'm doing it anyway. She stepped away from the podium as reporters swarmed. Ethan's phone started buzzing immediately. Texts, calls, notifications flooding in faster than he could read them. Sophie was staring at the phone screen. Dad, is that the lady from the building? Yeah. She's really mad at her dad, isn't she? I think she's just tired of lying. The phone rang. A number Ethan didn't recognize, but this time he answered. Mr. Cole, this is Rebecca Marsh. Victoria Hale gave me your number. I'm an attorney specializing in intellectual property theft and civil rights cases. Victoria mentioned you. I've been following your story since last night. I've also spent the past 6 hours reviewing every public document I could find about Sterling Gate's founding. Mr. Cole, I'd like to represent you. Victoria said you work on contingency. For the right cases, yes. And this is absolutely the right case. Rebecca's voice was sharp, energetic. What Richard Hale did to you was theft, plain and simple. The fact that he had lawyers draft contracts designed to cheat you doesn't make it legal. It makes it premeditated. Sterling Gate's legal team seems to think those contracts are ironclad. Sterling Gate's legal team is trying to scare you. Yes, the contracts are well drafted, but they relied on fraudulent misrepresentation. Richard Hale promised you equity, made you believe you'd receive it, then deliberately structured the terms to ensure you never could. That's fraud, and it voids the contract. Ethan felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it as hope. Can we win? Honestly, I don't know. This is going to be a long, brutal fight. Sterling Gate will throw everything at us. But Mr. Cole, you have something they don't. The truth, documentation, and now a former CEO willing to testify on your behalf. That's not nothing. What happens next? We file suit. Fraud, breach of contract, unjust enrichment. We demand not just the equity you're owed, but damages for 20 years of lost opportunity. We make this so expensive and so public that settling becomes Richard Hale's best option. And if he doesn't settle? Then we go to trial and let a jury decide. But fair warning, this could take 2 to 3 years before we see a courtroom. Can you handle that? Ethan looked at Sophie, who was eating her cereal and watching cartoons, blissfully unaware that her father was about to start a war with a billion-dollar company. Yeah, he said, I can handle it. Good. I'll draft the complaint today. We'll file by end of week. Rebecca paused. Mr. Cole, one more thing. The media is going to want to talk to you a lot. How you handle that will matter. Would you be willing to do one major interview, something that tells your story in your own words before Sterling Gates' PR machine buries you? What kind of interview? I'm thinking national morning show. Good Morning America or Today. Sympathetic interviewer, platform to reach millions of people. We control the narrative before they do. Ethan's stomach turned. I'm not good with cameras. You don't need to be good. You need to be honest. Can you do that? I guess we'll find out. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning. 3 days to prepare, Rebecca said. 3 days to get comfortable telling his story to the entire country. In the meantime, Ethan's life became a surreal mix of normal and chaos. He still took Sophie to school every morning, Marcus, the security guard, still escorting them to avoid reporters. He still came home and made dinner and helped with homework. But in between, there were calls with Rebecca, document reviews, preparation for the lawsuit that was about to consume his life. On Tuesday, Richard Hale's lawyers filed a motion requesting that Victoria's equity grant be voided. The board of Sterling Gate voted 8-3 to support the motion, effectively declaring war on their former CEO's final decision. Victoria called that evening. They're trying to undo the equity grant. I expected that. Can they succeed? Maybe. My authority as CEO was legitimate when I made the grant, but they'll argue I acted in bad faith or beyond my scope. It'll take months to resolve. She sounded tired. How are you holding up? Honestly, I have no idea. This whole thing feels like someone else's life. I know the feeling. I've been getting calls from board members all day telling me I destroyed my career for nothing. Do you regret it? No. For the first time in my life, I feel like I did something that actually mattered. She paused. Ethan, there's something else. My father wants to talk to you. Absolutely not. Hear me out. He called me this morning, said he wants to apologize, said he's willing to settle directly with you, separate from Sterling Gates' legal team. He had 20 years to apologize. I know, but he's panicking. The media coverage is destroying his reputation. His country club asked him to resign. His golf buddies are avoiding him. For the first time in his life, there are consequences for what he did. Good. Ethan, I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm just saying, if he's willing to settle, it might be worth hearing what he has to offer. I thought you supported me fighting this. I do, but I also know what these legal battles cost. Not just money, time, energy, peace of mind. If my father is genuinely willing to make this right, it might be worth considering. Ethan thought about it. About Richard Hale in his Florida condo, watching his reputation crumble. About the man who'd stolen everything Ethan had built, now facing the consequences. Set up the call, Ethan said finally. But I'm not making any promises. The call happened Wednesday evening after Sophie went to bed. Ethan sat at his kitchen table with Rebecca Marsh on speakerphone for legal support, while Victoria connected her father from Florida. Richard Hale's voice came through tinny and uncertain. Ethan, thank you for agreeing to talk. I'm not agreeing to anything except listening. Fair enough. Richard cleared his throat. I've been doing a lot of thinking since this became public, about what I did to you, about the choices I made, and I want you to know I was wrong. That's not an apology. You're right. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry I stole your work. I'm sorry I lied about it. I'm sorry I let you struggle for 20 years while I built an empire on what you created. I was a coward and a thief, and there's no excuse for it. The words sounded genuine. They also sounded like they'd been rehearsed with a PR consultant. What do you want, Richard? I want to settle this. Not through Sterling Gate. This is between you and me personally. I'll transfer you 5% of my personal shares in the company. Current value approximately $215 million. I'll also issue a public statement admitting what I did and crediting you as Sterling Gates' true founder. Ethan's breath caught. Rebecca shot him a look through the phone. Don't react. Don't commit. In exchange for what? You dropped the lawsuit. sign an agreement not to pursue further legal action against me or Sterling Gate, and we both move on with our lives. Why should I trust anything you promise me? Because this time it'll be in writing, reviewed by your attorney, and filed with the SEC. I can't back out without committing securities fraud. Richard's voice softened. Ethan, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm trying to make this right. Please, let me. Rebecca muted the call. Ethan, this is a strong offer. 215 million plus public acknowledgement. It's more than we'd likely win at trial. But it still lets him control the narrative. His statement will be carefully worded to minimize his culpability. He'll frame it as a business disagreement or miscommunication rather than theft, and you'll never get your day in court. Ethan unmuted. I need to think about it. Of course. Take all the time you need. Richard paused. Ethan, I know this doesn't fix what I did, but I hope it's a start. The call ended. Ethan sat in the silence of his kitchen, staring at nothing. $215 million, public acknowledgement, everything he'd wanted when this started. So why did it feel wrong? Rebecca spoke carefully. Ethan, I need to be honest with you. If you turn this down and we go to trial, there's a real chance we lose. The contracts are problematic. The statute of limitations might apply to some claims, and juries can be unpredictable. This settlement guarantees you generational wealth and public vindication. That's not nothing. I know. But it still feels like letting him win. He gets to write his own apology, frame his own redemption story, and walk away feeling like he did the right thing. Is that worse than risking everything in court and potentially getting nothing? Ethan didn't have an answer. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Whatever you decide, I support you. But my father is serious about this. It's probably the best offer you'll get. Another text, this one from James Wen. Heard about the settlement offer. Take it. You deserve the money, and Richard deserves the humiliation of admitting what he did. Another from Ron Patterson. 215 million? Cole, if you don't take that money, I'm going to drive to your apartment and knock some sense into you. Everyone had an opinion about what he should do. Everyone except the one person whose opinion actually mattered. Ethan knocked softly on Sophie's door. She was still awake, reading by her nightlight. Hey, troublemaker, can I ask you something? Is it about the bad man? Sort of. He wants to give us a lot of money and say he's sorry for what he did. If I take the money, all the scary stuff stops. The reporters, the lawyers, all of it. We can go back to normal. Sophie put down her book. But it means I stop fighting. I agree that his apology is enough and we all move on. Is his apology enough? Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. I don't know. Part of me wants to keep fighting until everyone knows exactly what he did. But part of me just wants this to be over so we can have a quiet life again. Sophie thought about this with her characteristic seriousness. Mrs. Rodriguez says that when someone does something wrong, sorry is only the first step. They also have to fix what they broke. Your teacher is pretty smart. So if the bad man is really sorry, he should fix what he broke. Did he break a lot? Yeah, baby, he broke a lot. Then just saying sorry isn't enough. Sophie reached for his hand. But Dad, I don't care about the money. I just want you to be happy. You've been sad for a really long time. The observation hit harder than anything else had. Because she was right. Ethan had been sad for a long time. Not just about Richard Hale, but about all the accumulated disappointments of building a life from the scraps of someone else's theft. What if fighting makes me sadder? He asked quietly. Then stop fighting. But Dad, she squeezed his hand. Don't stop because you're scared. Stop because you're done. Ethan kissed her forehead. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just finally noticed. He smiled despite everything, then went back to the kitchen and called Rebecca. I'm turning down the settlement. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Richard Hale spent 20 years avoiding consequences. I'm not giving him an easy out now just because he's finally feeling the pressure. Okay, then we proceed with the lawsuit. I'll have the filing ready by Friday. Rebecca, can we win this? Honestly, it's 50-50 at best, but sometimes fighting isn't about winning. It's about refusing to lose quietly. Thursday morning arrived with artificial cheerfulness. Ethan put on the suit that Rebecca's team had sent over. nicer than anything he'd ever owned, and let the stylist they'd hired do something with his hair that made him look almost respectable. Sophie watched the whole process with fascination. "You look fancy, Dad." "I feel ridiculous." "You look like you're supposed to be on TV." The car service picked him up at 5 a.m. for the drive to the studio. Carmen drove. Victoria had insisted on keeping her on as Ethan's security until things settled down. The morning show's green room was exactly like the movies. Uncomfortable furniture, too bright lights, a table full of snacks nobody was eating. The interviewer was a woman in her 50s named Patricia Chen, known for her tough but fair approach. She shook Ethan's hand with a firm grip. "Mr. Cole, thank you for doing this. I promise to let you tell your story without interruption. I'm not good at this kind of thing." "You don't need to be good, just honest." She smiled. "Remember, 50 million people watching want you to succeed. You're the underdog. Everyone loves an underdog." They led him onto the set at 7:42 a.m. The lights were blinding. Patricia sat across from him, professional and calm. Ethan tried to remember Rebecca's coaching. Speak clearly, don't ramble, let the emotion show naturally. "We're live in 30 seconds, someone called out. Ethan's heart hammered. The countdown started. 5, 4, 3, 2. Good morning, I'm Patricia Chen, and today we have an exclusive interview with Ethan Cole, the programmer at the center of the Sterling Gate financial scandal. She turned to him. "Mr. Cole, thank you for being here. Thanks for having me. Let's start at the beginning. 23 years ago, you were 19 years old when you met Richard Hale. Can you tell us what happened?" And Ethan told the story. All of it. The initial meeting, the 6 months of work, the promises of partnership. The midnight call about the critical system flaw and fixing it while Sarah slept in the next room. The gradual realization that Richard was cutting him out. The unanswered calls and disconnected numbers, and finally just giving up because he had a baby on the way and bills to pay. Patricia listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to genuine empathy. "So you just walked away?" "What else was I supposed to do? I was 20 years old with no money, no lawyer, no proof beyond some handwritten notes. Richard Hale was successful and connected. Who was going to believe me? Did you ever try to contact him again over the years?" "No. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that I needed to focus on surviving, on raising my daughter, on building whatever life I could. The past was gone. Fighting for it felt like dwelling on something I couldn't change." "What changed?" Ethan thought about that interview last Thursday, about Victoria's face when she dismissed him, about Sophie watching through the glass. "I applied for a job at Sterling Gate last week. I didn't know Richard Hale had retired or that his daughter was CEO. I just thought maybe after 20 years of maintenance work, I could finally do what I was actually good at." He paused. "They rejected me in about 5 minutes. The CEO told me my experience was just maintenance work, not relevant to real engineering. And that CEO was Victoria Hale, Richard's daughter." "Yeah, but she didn't know. Nobody knew what her father had done except him. She was just making a judgment based on my resume. Some people might be angry about that. I was angry. But then their systems crashed and they called me in the middle of the night for help. And I realized I'd built those systems. They were falling apart because nobody understood them like I did, so I fixed it." Patricia leaned forward. "You fixed in 11 minutes what their elite engineering team couldn't fix in 6 hours. I knew the architecture. They didn't. Because you built it. Because I built it." The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Patricia asked about the Florida confrontation, about Richard's lies on CNN, about the settlement offer Ethan had just rejected. By the end, Ethan felt wrung out, but also strangely lighter, like telling the story had released something he'd been carrying for too long. "Last question, Mr. Cole. What do you want people to know about your story?" Ethan thought about Sophie asking if truth was worth more than a bedroom, about 19-year-old him staying up all night writing code and believing the world was fair, about the 20 years in between. "I want people to know that what happened to me happens all the time. People with power take credit for other people's work. They use lawyers and contracts and money to make theft look legal. And usually it works because fighting back costs more than most people can afford to lose." He looked directly at the camera. "But sometimes you have to fight anyway, not because you'll win, but because staying silent feels worse than losing. The segment ended. Patricia thanked him warmly, and someone unhooked his microphone. Ethan walked off the set in a daze, barely aware of the producer saying something about social media response being overwhelmingly positive. Carmen was waiting in the green room. "You did good." "I couldn't tell. The lights were too bright to see anything." His phone was buzzing non-stop. Text from Rebecca. "Perfect. Exactly what we needed." Text from Victoria. "You were incredible." Text from James. "When?" "Just watched with the entire engineering team, standing ovation when you described fixing the system in 11 minutes, and one from a number Ethan hadn't seen in 4 years. Sarah. Sarah. I saw the interview. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry for everything." Ethan stared at that message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. The ride back to his apartment took forever. Traffic, construction, the usual Chicago chaos. But when they finally arrived, Ethan found Sophie and Mrs. Chen from next door waiting on the front steps. Sophie was supposed to be at school. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Chen stood up, looking apologetic. The school called. Reporters were trying to get pictures of Sophie during recess. The principal thought it would be better if she came home. Ethan's blood went cold. "They were photographing my daughter?" "The school stopped them, but yes, I'm so sorry." Sophie ran to him, and Ethan picked her up even though she was getting too big for it. "Are you okay, baby?" "I'm fine, but Dad, this is getting really scary." She was right. This whole thing had started as a private injustice, becoming public knowledge. Now it was becoming a media circus that was affecting his 7-year-old daughter's ability to go to school safely. Inside the apartment, Ethan called Rebecca. "They're going after Sophie now, trying to photograph her at school. I'll file for a protective order immediately. No media contact with minors, no photography without consent." Rebecca's voice was tight with anger. "This is exactly the kind of overreach that makes Sterling Gate look desperate. I don't care how it makes them look. I care about keeping my daughter safe." "I know. I'm on it." The protective order was filed that afternoon and granted by early evening. But the damage was done. Sophie's school recommended she stay home for the rest of the week while they implemented better security measures, which meant Sophie was home on Friday when the lawsuit was officially filed. Rebecca had warned him it would be big news, but Ethan wasn't prepared for the scale. Every major outlet ran the story: Cole versus Sterling Gate, the billion-dollar lawsuit. The filing itself was brutal in its detail. Fraud, breach of contract, unjust enrichment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Rebecca was asking for the 5% equity, damages for lost opportunity, and punitive damages for Richard Hale's deliberate misconduct. The total amount, $847 million. Ethan nearly choked when he saw the number. "Rebecca, that's insane. That's what you're owed. 5% equity at current valuation plus 20 years of lost opportunity, investment gains you would have made, salary differential between what you earned and what you should have earned, interest compounded annually. The math is sound. No jury is going to give me almost $1 billion. Maybe not, but we're anchoring high so that when we settle, and we will settle, it's for a substantial amount. This is negotiation tactics." Sterling Gate's response came within hours. A statement from their legal team calling the lawsuit frivolous, baseless, and a transparent attempt at extortion by someone who contributed minimally to the company's early development and now seeks to profit from its success. The media cycle accelerated. Think pieces about IP theft, corporate accountability, the plight of self-taught programmers. Richard Hale gave another interview, this one more aggressive, calling Ethan delusional and rewriting history for financial gain. Victoria fired back with a tweet. "My father's lying. I have the documents. I saw the proof. Ethan Cole built Sterling Gate and my father stole it. End of story." The internet exploded. Sophie watched it all happening with increasing worry. "Dad, when does this stop?" "I don't know, baby." "Are we still going to be okay?" Ethan pulled her close. "Yeah, we're going to be okay. It might be scary and messy for a while, but we'll get through it. Together, always together." That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep, Ethan sat alone in the dark, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. He turned down financial security. He'd chosen a legal battle that might drag on for years. He'd put his daughter in the spotlight and disrupted her life. All for what? The truth? Justice? Some abstract principle about standing up to powerful people? His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. My father just called. He's furious about the lawsuit, says you've gone too far. Ethan. Good. Victoria. He wants to settle again. Says he'll go higher. 300 million if you drop everything now. Ethan stared at the number. $300 million. More money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Enough to give Sophie everything, security forever, complete financial freedom. Ethan. Tell him no. Victoria. Are you sure? Ethan thought about Sophie asking when this would stop, about the reporters at her school, about the price of fighting when you had someone else to protect. But he also thought about 7-year-old Sophie saying the bad man should fix what he broke, about 19-year-old Ethan believing his work mattered, about refusing to teach his daughter that everything, including the truth, had a price. Ethan. I'm sure. See you in court. The lawsuit turned Ethan's life into something he barely recognized. Days blurred into depositions, document reviews, strategy sessions with Rebecca and her legal team. Nights meant helping Sophie with homework, while trying not to think about the mounting pressure of going to war with a billion-dollar company. 3 weeks after filing, Sterling Gates' legal team delivered their counterpunch, a motion to dismiss the entire case, accompanied by a 100-page brief arguing that Ethan's claims were barred by the statute of limitations, that the contracts were valid, and that his entire lawsuit was nothing more than opportunistic fiction. Rebecca called it predictable. Ethan called it terrifying. They're trying to kill this before discovery, Rebecca explained over coffee at a diner near Ethan's apartment. If we survive the motion to dismiss, we get access to Sterling Gates' internal documents, emails, financial records, everything. They don't want that happening. What are our chances? 60-40 in our favor, maybe 50-50 depending on which judge we draw. She stirred her coffee absently. But Ethan, even if we win the motion, this gets harder from here. Discovery is brutal. Depositions are worse. And trial, if we make it that far, could be months of testimony. You're trying to talk me out of this. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you've signed up for. Rebecca met his eyes. Sterling Gates' lawyers have already started circling your personal life. They've contacted Building Services Group, interviewed people you've worked with, pulled your credit reports. They're building a profile to tear you apart on the stand. Ethan's stomach turned. What kind of profile? The kind that makes you look unstable. Struggling single father, abandoned by his wife, barely making ends meet, desperate for money. They'll argue you invented this whole narrative because you're broke and opportunistic. That's not what happened. I know, but they'll make it sound plausible. Rebecca leaned forward. They've also found Sarah. The name hit like a physical blow. My ex-wife? She's living in Portland. Remarried. Sterling Gates' lawyers contacted her last week asking about your relationship, your state of mind when she left, whether you ever talked about Richard Hale or Sterling Gate. What did she tell them? Nothing yet. She called me instead. Rebecca pulled out her phone, showed him an email. She wants to talk to you, says she has information that might help your case, but she'll only share it with you directly. Ethan stared at Sarah's email address on the screen. 4 years of silence, and now she wanted to help? This is a trap. Maybe. Or maybe she genuinely feels guilty and wants to make amends. Either way, you should hear what she has to say. If it's useful, we use it. If it's not, we ignore it. And if she's working with Sterling Gates' lawyers, then we find out what they're planning and adjust accordingly. Rebecca closed her phone. Your call, Ethan, but information is power, and right now we need all the power we can get. The call with Sarah happened that evening after Sophie went to bed. Ethan sat at his kitchen table with Rebecca on speakerphone, staring at his ex-wife's number like it might explode. He dialed. Sarah answered on the third ring. Ethan. Her voice was exactly the same, soft, hesitant, the tone she used when she wanted something. Thank you for calling. Rebecca said you have information. Can we not do the lawyer thing? Can it just be us talking? No. Whatever you have to say, my attorney needs to hear it. Sarah sighed. Fine. I saw your interview. I've been following the lawsuit, and I wanted you to know I remember Sterling Gate. Ethan went still. What? When we were together. When I was pregnant with Sophie. You talked about Richard Hale constantly. about the company you were building, about how you'd been promised equity, about how once Sterling Gate launched, you'd finally have financial security. Her voice cracked slightly. You were so excited, Ethan, so convinced it was going to change our lives. I don't understand what you're telling me. I'm saying I can testify. I can confirm that you talked about the equity agreement before I left, that it wasn't something you invented recently, that you genuinely believed Richard Hale had promised you partnership. Rebecca unmuted herself. Ms. Cole, it's Miller now, Sarah Miller. Ms. Miller, this is Rebecca Marsh, Ethan's attorney. Are you saying you're willing to provide testimony supporting Ethan's version of events?
Yes, if it helps. Sarah paused. Ethan, I know I don't have any right to ask for your forgiveness. I left you when you needed me most. I abandoned Sophie. I've been a terrible mother and a worse ex-wife. But if I can help you get justice for what Richard Hale did, maybe it's a start toward making things right.
Ethan felt something complicated twisting in his chest. Not forgiveness. That was still miles away. But maybe the faintest edge of understanding. Why now? Why reach out after 4 years of silence? Because I saw you on TV talking about being a single father, about doing maintenance work to support Sophie, about barely holding on. And I realized, you've been doing alone what we were supposed to do together. Everything that's happened to you, all the struggling and sacrifice, part of that is because I quit on you. Part of it is because Richard Hale stole my future. Yes, but part of it is because I wasn't there when you needed me to be. And I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. Rebecca jumped in. Ms. Miller, if you're serious about testifying, I'll need to take your formal statement. We'll also need any documentation you might have. Emails, texts, anything from that time period that references the equity agreement or Sterling Gate.
I don't have much. We weren't exactly digital back then, but I kept some things. Letters Ethan wrote me about his dreams for the company. A birthday card where he talked about our future after Sterling Gate launched. Sarah's voice was quiet. I'll send everything to you. The call ended shortly after. Ethan sat in the silence of his kitchen, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath him. Rebecca spoke carefully. This is good for us. A witness who can corroborate your contemporaneous understanding of the equity agreement strengthens our fraud claim significantly. She left me. Ethan heard his own voice, flat and distant. She walked away from Sophie without looking back. And now she wants to help? People are complicated. Maybe she genuinely feels guilty. Maybe she's trying to ease her conscience. Or maybe she just wants to be part of the story. Rebecca paused. But her motivation doesn't change the value of her testimony. If she's willing to go on record, we use it. Even though I don't forgive her? You don't have to forgive her to accept her help. They're separate things. Ethan thought about that later, lying awake at 2 a.m. with the radiator clanking and the city humming outside his window. Forgiveness and help. Justice and revenge. Truth and victory. Everything in his life had become about separating things that used to be connected, about choosing between options that all felt wrong in different ways. The motion to dismiss hearing was scheduled for mid-December, 6 weeks after filing. Rebecca warned him it would be technical, boring, mostly lawyers arguing procedural points. But Ethan insisted on being there anyway. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected, less dramatic. Federal courthouse in downtown Chicago, fluorescent lights and worn wooden benches. Sterling Gate's legal team took up an entire table, 5 lawyers in expensive suits, all looking confident and prepared. Rebecca sat alone on Ethan's side with just him and a paralegal for support. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named Patricia Morrison, with a reputation for being thorough and impatient with bullshit. She took the bench exactly on time and got straight to business. Counsel for the defendant, your motion. Sterling Gate's lead attorney stood, a man named David Krause, who apparently charged $1,200 an hour and had never lost a motion to dismiss. He spoke for 45 minutes about statutes of limitation, contractual validity, and the legal impossibility of Ethan's claims. Your Honor, Mr. Cole signed comprehensive agreements that clearly specified vesting requirements. He failed to meet those requirements. 23 years later, after his former employer has become successful, he's attempting to rewrite history through litigation. This case is nothing more than opportunistic fiction dressed up as fraud. Rebecca stood for rebuttal.
She was half Krause's age and probably a tenth his hourly rate, but she didn't look intimidated. Your Honor, the statute of limitations for fraud begins when the fraud is discovered, not when it occurred. Mr. Cole only learned the full extent of Richard Hale's deception 3 weeks ago when Victoria Hale revealed hidden documentation. As for the contracts, they were procured through fraudulent misrepresentation. Richard Hale promised Mr. Cole equity while simultaneously structuring the agreements to ensure he could never receive it. That's textbook fraud, and it voids the contracts entirely. Judge Morrison asked pointed questions of both sides, took notes, and reserved judgment. I'll issue a written decision within 30 days. Court is adjourned. Walking out of the courthouse, Ethan felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. How do you think it went? Better than I expected. Morrison asked the right questions. She's not buying Sterling Gates' argument wholesale. Rebecca pulled her coat tighter against the December wind. But it's still a coin flip. We won't know until she rules. The ruling came on December 18th, 3 days before Christmas. Judge Morrison denied Sterling Gates' motion to dismiss in its entirety. Rebecca called Ethan while he was helping Sophie decorate a small tree they'd bought from the lot down the street. We won. We're going to discovery. Ethan sat down heavily on the couch. What does that mean? It means Sterling Gate has to turn over documents. Everything related to your work, Richard Hale's communications from that period, internal discussions about cutting you out. If there's evidence, we're about to find it. And if there's not, then we fight with what we have. But Ethan, this is huge. Morrison's opinion basically validates your entire theory of the case. She says the fraud claim is viable, the contracts are suspect, and you're entitled to pursue your claims. Sterling Gate just lost their best chance to kill this early. Sophie was watching him with worried eyes. Ethan gave her a thumbs up, and she smiled uncertainly. What happens next? Discovery starts in January. Depositions, document production, the whole thing. It's going to get intense. Sterling Gates' response was immediate and vicious. That evening, Richard Hale gave an interview to Bloomberg calling the judge's decision a travesty of justice and promising to fight this frivolous lawsuit with every resource at our disposal. The interviewer pressed him. Mr. Hale, your own daughter has testified that she found documentation proving Mr. Cole built Sterling Gates' core systems. How do you respond? My daughter is young and has been manipulated by someone who knows exactly how to exploit her guilt about privilege. Victoria wants so badly to be different from me that she's willing to believe lies that confirm her biases. So you're saying the documents are fake? I'm saying they're being misinterpreted. Yes, Ethan Cole did some contract work for Sterling Gate 23 years ago. But to claim he built the company is absurd. We've had hundreds of engineers contribute over the years. Cole was one of many, and not even the most important. Ethan watched the interview with Sophie curled beside him on the couch. Dad, he's lying again. Yeah, baby, he is. But the judge believes you, right? The judge says I can try to prove what happened. That's different from believing me. But you can prove it. You have the papers with your name on them. It's more complicated than that. Ethan tried to find words a 7-year-old would understand. The bad man has really good lawyers who are good at making complicated things confusing. So even when the truth is clear, they can make people doubt it. Sophie thought about this seriously. That doesn't seem fair. It's not. But it's how the world works sometimes. Christmas came and went quietly. Ethan couldn't afford much. Money was tight with legal bills mounting even on contingency, but he got Sophie the art supplies she'd been wanting, and they spent Christmas Day drawing together while watching old movies. Victoria texted, Merry Christmas. I know this year has been difficult. Thank you for not giving up. Ethan, thank you for telling the truth even though it cost you everything. Victoria, I'm not sure I lost everything. Maybe I just lost the things that didn't actually matter. Discovery began the first week of January and quickly became consuming. Sterling Gate produced over 50,000 documents, emails, financial records, board meeting minutes, engineering logs. Most of it was garbage, irrelevant material dumped to bury the useful evidence. But Rebecca's team found gems. An email from Richard Hale to his first attorney, dated 3 months after Ethan stopped calling. Need to ensure Cole equity agreement is airtight in our favor. Can't have him claiming partnership if this company succeeds. Another email, this one to Sterling Gates' first CFO. Removed E. Cole from all public-facing documentation per legal advice. Official narrative is that I built the core systems. Notes from a board meeting in Sterling Gates' second year. RH confirmed original contractor is no longer involved and poses no IP risk to company. Each document was a small piece of evidence, but together they painted a damning picture of deliberate erasure. Rebecca was cautiously optimistic. This is good. This is very good. Shows intentionality, shows Richard knew exactly what he was doing. But Sterling Gates' lawyers had their own discoveries. They'd found Ethan's maintenance work records showing times he'd been written up for missed appointments. They'd found credit card debt and late rent payments. They'd interviewed Ron Patterson, who'd apparently mentioned that Ethan had talked about the Sterling Gate interview as his one chance to change his life. They're building a desperation narrative, Rebecca warned. Struggling father, drowning in debt, sees his former employer become successful and invents a story to get a piece of it. But that's not what happened. I know, but they'll make it sound convincing. The deposition started in February. Ethan was deposed first, 2 full days of Sterling Gates' lawyers asking him every question imaginable about his relationship with Richard Hale, his memory of events from 23 years ago, his financial situation, his motives for filing suit. David Krause led the questioning with surgical precision. Mr. Cole, you say you believed you'd receive 5% equity in Sterling Gate, but you never asked for written confirmation of this arrangement? I was 19, I trusted him. So you have no documentation beyond the preliminary contracts we've already reviewed? I have the work I did, the systems I built. Systems that were substantially modified by Sterling Gates' engineering team over the subsequent 20 years, correct? Modified but built on my architecture. Can you prove that? Can you demonstrate that the current Sterling Gate systems contain any of your original code? Ethan hesitated. The truth was complicated. The systems had been refactored, rewritten, modernized. The underlying logic was his, but the actual implementation was different. The core architecture patterns are mine. Architecture patterns aren't copyrightable, Mr. Cole. They're industry-standard approaches that any competent engineer might use. Krause smiled thinly. So again, can you prove the current systems contain your specific work? I can prove I built the original systems that everything else was based on. Based on your handwritten notes. Notes that could have been created at any time. Rebecca objected. Counsel is testifying. Mr. Cole can't speak to when his contemporaneous documentation was created beyond his own knowledge. The deposition went on for hours. By the end, Ethan felt wrung out and uncertain. Krause had made even simple truths sound suspicious through careful questioning. How'd I do? He asked Rebecca afterward. You did fine. You told the truth. That's what matters. But she looked worried. Richard Hale's deposition was scheduled for March. Ethan insisted on being there. Richard sat across the conference table looking older than Ethan remembered, but still composed, still confident. Rebecca led the questioning. Mr. Hale, when you hired Ethan Cole, what was your understanding of the arrangement? I hired him as a contractor to build some initial systems. We discussed potential equity if the company succeeded and if he met certain performance milestones. What milestones? Completion of agreed deliverables, continued involvement with the company, achievement of revenue targets. Were these milestones documented in writing? They were discussed verbally and incorporated into the contracts. Mr. Hale, I'm showing you an email you sent to your attorney 3 months after Mr. Cole stopped working with you. Rebecca slid a document across the table. You wrote, need to ensure Cole equity agreement is airtight in our favor. Can you explain what you meant by that? Richard glanced at the email without reaction. I was ensuring our legal documents were solid, standard business practice. But why did you need it to be in our favor if Mr. Cole had legitimately failed to meet the milestones? Poor word choice. I meant legally sound. Did you tell Mr. Cole he'd failed to meet the milestones? We had discussions about his performance. What discussions specifically? I don't recall the exact conversations. This was over 20 years ago. Do you recall telling him the equity would be forthcoming after some legal delays? No. Do you recall him calling you repeatedly trying to follow up on the equity agreement? I may have received some calls. I don't recall specifics. Mr. Hale, I'm showing you phone records from Sterling Gates' early days. Mr. Cole's number appears 17 times over a 6-month period. Do you recall those 17 calls? Vaguely. He may have called about various matters. Did you return those calls? Richard shifted slightly. I was building a company. I couldn't return every call. The deposition went on. Richard had answers for everything, explanations that were just plausible enough to create doubt. By the end, Ethan felt sick. Outside the conference room, he confronted Rebecca. He's going to get away with it, isn't he? He's a good witness, prepared, calm, has an answer for everything. Rebecca gathered her files. But that doesn't mean he's believable. Juries are pretty good at spotting liars. This is going to go to trial. Almost certainly. Sterling Gate made another settlement offer last week. $50 million, no admission of wrongdoing. I told them to go to hell. Ethan stopped walking. You didn't tell me about an offer. Because I knew you'd agonize over it. Ethan, we're past the point of settling. We have good evidence, a viable case, and a trial date in September. We're seeing this through. $50 million, Rebecca, is not what you're owed. And taking it now, after everything you've been through, would be giving up right before the finish line. She met his eyes. Unless you want to settle, then tell me and I'll call them back. Ethan thought about Sophie asking if truth was worth more than a bedroom. Thought about the past 6 months of depositions and discovery and watching his life get dissected by hostile lawyers. Thought about Richard Hale sitting calmly in that conference room lying with practiced ease. No, we go to trial. The months between March and September passed in a blur of preparation. Rebecca's team prepared exhibits, witness lists, opening statements. Sterling Gates' team filed motions trying to exclude evidence, limit testimony, narrow the claims. Sophie turned 8 in June. Ethan threw her a small party at the apartment with a few friends from school, trying to give her some normalcy amid the chaos. She blew out her candles and made a wish, and when Ethan asked what she'd wished for, she said, I can't tell you, or it won't come true. But later, getting ready for bed, she admitted it. I wished for the bad man to tell the truth. Baby, birthday wishes are supposed to be about fun things, toys or trips or puppies. I know, but that's what I wanted most. Victoria had been quiet for months, staying out of the public eye after stepping down as CEO. But in August, she called Ethan. My father wants to meet with you, in person, just you and him. Absolutely not. Ethan, please. He says he has something to tell you, something he'll only say face to face. He can tell it to the jury. He's dying. The word stopped Ethan cold. What? Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. He was diagnosed 6 months ago. The doctors say he has maybe 8 weeks left. Victoria's voice was shaking. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not even asking you to believe him. I'm just asking you to hear what he has to say before it's too late. Ethan sat down heavily. Why didn't he tell anyone? Because he's stubborn and proud and wanted to fight this lawsuit without people thinking he was asking for sympathy. She paused. But now he's in hospice and he's asking for you. Please, Ethan, just one conversation. Rebecca advised against it. Anything he says could be used to undermine your case, and if he's dying, he has nothing to lose by lying. Or nothing to lose by telling the truth. That too. But Ethan, are you sure you want to do this? The trial starts in 3 weeks. You don't need closure from Richard Hale to win. Maybe I need it for something else. The hospice facility was in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, the kind of place that tried to make dying look peaceful. Richard Hale was in a private room overlooking a small garden. He looked nothing like the man who'd sat confidently in his Florida condo or lied smoothly in depositions. Cancer had hollowed him out, left him gaunt and gray. Victoria let Ethan into the room, then quietly left, closing the door behind her. Richard was awake, propped up on pillows, oxygen tube in his nose. He looked at Ethan with eyes that held something Ethan couldn't quite identify. Not quite regret, not quite fear. Maybe just exhaustion. Thank you for coming. His voice was thin, breathless. Ethan stayed standing. Victoria said you had something to tell me. I wanted to apologize, properly this time. Not through lawyers or PR statements, just me to you. Richard took a shallow breath. What I did to you was wrong. Not just legally wrong or ethically wrong, but fundamentally wrong. I took what you built and called it mine. I erased you from history to protect my reputation.
and I let you struggle for 20 years while I got rich off your work. I know all that already.
But I never said it out loud, to your face, and I needed to before. He gestured vaguely at the hospice room, at his dying body. Before this is over. Why now? Why tell me this 3 weeks before trial? Because I'm done lying. It's exhausting, Ethan. Maintaining the fiction, watching my daughter hate me for it, knowing that my last act on earth is going to be losing a lawsuit because I'm too proud to admit what I did. Richard's eyes were wet. I built an empire on stolen ground and convinced myself it was justified. But now I'm dying, and none of it matters. The money doesn't matter. The reputation doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the truth, and I stole that from you too. Ethan felt something shifting inside him, some burden he'd been carrying starting to loosen. Are you going to testify? Tell the court what you just told me? My lawyers have advised against it. They say it would destroy Sterling Gates' defense, expose the company to massive liability, possibly even criminal charges. Richard smiled weakly. But I'm dying anyway. What are they going to do, sue my corpse? So you'll testify. If you still want to go to trial, or, Richard paused. Or we could settle this now. Not through lawyers, just us. I'll transfer you 10% of my personal shares in Sterling Gate, current value around $430 million. I'll issue a public statement admitting everything, and you drop the lawsuit. 10%. You originally promised me 5%. The extra 5% is interest for 20 years of theft. Richard met his eyes. I can't give you back the time I took. I can't undo what I did to your life. But I can make sure you and Sophie never worry about money again. And I can make sure everyone knows the truth about what I did. Ethan stood there looking at this dying man who'd shaped his entire adult life through one act of theft. Part of him wanted to feel satisfaction, vindication, the pleasure of watching his enemy broken and repentant. Instead, he just felt tired. I need to think about it. I understand, but Ethan, I probably have 6 weeks left. Whatever you decide, decide soon. Ethan left without saying goodbye. That night, he talked it through with Sophie. She was 8 now, old enough to understand more than he wanted her to. The bad man is dying and he wants to say sorry by giving us money. A lot of money? Enough that you'd never have to worry about anything. College, your own house someday, whatever you wanted. Sophie was quiet, processing. Is he really sorry, or does he just not want to lose the trial? I think maybe he's really sorry, but I also think he knows he's going to lose. If he gives us the money and says he's sorry, does that make what he did okay? No, but it makes it acknowledged, fixed as much as it can be fixed. What do you want to do, Dad? Ethan thought about the past 9 months. The depositions, the stress, the reporters, the way this lawsuit had consumed their lives. Thought about going to trial in 3 weeks, spending months in court, putting Sophie through more disruption. Thought about Richard Hale dying alone, his final act on earth being publicly humiliated in a trial he couldn't win. I think I want this to be over. Then make it be over. Sophie said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Ethan called Rebecca. Set up a meeting with Richard Hale's lawyers. We're settling. The settlement was finalized in 10 days. Richard Hale transferred 10% of his personal Sterling Gate shares to Ethan, worth $432 million at current valuation. He issued a public statement admitting that he had stolen Ethan Cole's work, erased his contributions, and lied about Sterling Gate's founding for 23 years. The statement ended with, "I'm deeply ashamed of what I did. Ethan Cole built Sterling Gate. I just took credit for it. He deserved partnership and recognition. Instead, I gave him nothing and spent decades pretending he didn't matter. I was wrong. I am sorry. And I hope this settlement, inadequate as it is, begins to make amends for the harm I caused." The media coverage was massive, not because of the money, though $432 million was certainly newsworthy, but because Richard Hale's admission validated everything Ethan had been saying. The story shifted from he said, to Billionaire admits to decades of theft. Sterling Gates' board immediately distanced themselves from Richard, issuing statements about how his actions predated current management and didn't reflect the company's values. Victoria called, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving my father the chance to tell the truth before he died. I didn't do it for him. I know, but still, thank you." Richard Hale died 6 weeks later in late October with Victoria at his bedside.
The obituaries mentioned Sterling Gates' founding, but they also mentioned the scandal, the theft, the public admission.
His legacy was complicated now. Not the simple story of visionary founder, but the messier truth of flawed human who'd stolen something precious and spent his last weeks trying to make it right. Ethan didn't attend the funeral. Instead, he took Sophie to look at houses. They found one in a quiet neighborhood with good schools, 3 bedrooms, a yard big enough for the puppy Sophie had been asking about, close enough to the city that Ethan could still get to work easily, but far enough out that reporters wouldn't camp on their doorstep. Sophie walked through the empty rooms with wonder. "This is ours? If you like it." "I love it. Can I really have my own room?" "You can have your own room. We can paint it whatever color you want." She threw her arms around him, and Ethan held his daughter in the empty house that represented everything he'd fought for and thought he'd lost, and somehow fought his way back to. Victoria offered him the Sterling Gates CEO position again, but Ethan declined. Instead, he accepted a position as Chief Technology Advisor, consulting work, flexible hours, the kind of role that let him actually use his skills without sacrificing time with Sophie. His first project was rebuilding Sterling Gates' core systems from the ground up, modernizing the architecture he'd created 23 years ago. This time, his name was on everything. This time, everyone knew who'd built it. James Wen became CTO and reported directly to Ethan on technical matters. They worked well together, James eager to learn, Ethan finally getting to mentor someone the way he'd once hoped Richard would mentor him. The money changed things, obviously. Ethan set up a trust for Sophie that would cover her education and then some. He donated to the library where he'd first taught himself to code, funding a computer lab for kids who couldn't afford their own equipment. He established a scholarship for self-taught programmers trying to break into tech without formal degrees. But the money didn't fix everything. Couldn't fix everything. Some nights Ethan still woke up at 3 a.m. with anxiety about bills before remembering he didn't have to worry anymore. Some days he still felt like an imposter in meetings with executives, still heard Victoria's voice from that first interview calling his experience maintenance work at best. The trauma of 20 years didn't evaporate just because the bank account changed. 6 months after the settlement, Ethan took Sophie to the park near their new house. She was on the swings, pumping her legs and laughing, and Ethan sat on a bench watching her with something that felt almost like peace. His phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. "I saw the news about the settlement. I'm happy for you and Sophie. I hope someday I can be part of her life again, but I understand if that's not possible. Take care." Ethan stared at the message. Sarah had testified during the settlement negotiations, had provided evidence that helped establish Ethan's contemporaneous understanding of the equity agreement. In a small way, she'd contributed to his victory. But that didn't erase 4 years of absence. Didn't make up for the night Sophie had cried, asking why her mom didn't love her enough to stay. Ethan didn't respond to the text. Maybe someday he would. Maybe someday Sophie would want contact with her mother, but today wasn't that day. "Dad, watch this!" Sophie jumped off the swing at the height of the arc, landed perfectly, threw her arms up like a gymnast. That was great, troublemaker. She ran back to the swings for another round, and Ethan watched her with a clarity he'd been missing for years. This was what mattered. Not the money, or the vindication, or Richard Hale's deathbed confession. Not even the truth, really, though the truth had been worth fighting for. What mattered was being present for this moment. For Sophie's laughter and scraped knees and homework battles and all the small ordinary pieces of raising a child who'd watched her father struggle and never stopped believing he was capable of more. Victoria texted. "Board meeting went well. They approved your proposal for the Junior Developer Mentorship Program. We start hiring in January." Ethan. "That's great. Thanks for pushing it through." Victoria. "It's the right thing to do," which surprisingly is becoming easier to recognize now that I'm not trying to protect my father's legacy. Ethan. "How are you doing with all that?" Victoria. "Honestly, some days I'm angry at him for lying to me my whole life. Some days I miss him desperately. Most days it's both at once. Grief is complicated." Ethan. "Yeah, it is." Victoria. "Thank you for settling instead of destroying him in court. I know you could have. I know he deserved it." Ethan. "I didn't settle for him. I settled for me. And for Sophie. We needed this to be over more than we needed total victory." Victoria. "That's probably the most mature thing I've ever heard." Ethan.
Don't get used to it. I'm still figuring this out as I go.
The sun was setting over the park, turning everything golden. Sophie had moved from the swings to the climbing structure, navigating it with the fearless confidence of an 8-year-old who'd watched her father fight impossible battles and win. Ethan thought about 19-year-old him, staying up all night writing code and believing hard work mattered. That kid had been right about some things and naive about others. Work did matter, but so did knowing when to fight and when to walk away. So did protecting the people you loved, even when protecting them meant compromising your principles. So did understanding that justice wasn't always clean or satisfying, that sometimes the best you could get was acknowledgement and enough money to build something better. Dad, it's getting dark. Can we go home? Home. The word still felt new, still carried weight. Not the cramped apartment where they'd barely survived, but the house with 3 bedrooms and a yard and space to breathe. Yeah, baby, let's go home. They walked back together through the October evening, Sophie chattering about school and friends, and whether they could really get a puppy for Christmas. Ethan listened and responded and felt the weight of the past 9 months finally starting to lift. The lawsuit was over. Richard Hale was dead. The truth was documented and acknowledged. Sterling Gate Systems carried Ethan's name. It wasn't the ending 19-year-old Ethan had imagined. That kid had wanted pure victory, complete vindication, Richard Hale brought to his knees. But 32-year-old Ethan understood that real endings were messier than that you could win and still carry scars, that justice could be expensive and complicated and insufficient even when you got it, that sometimes the best you could do was tell the truth, fight for what you deserved, and build something good from the wreckage of what was stolen. Inside their new house, Sophie ran straight to her room to add another drawing to the collection covering her walls. Ethan stood in the kitchen, his kitchen, in his house, paid for with money he'd finally been acknowledged as earning, and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. The damage was too deep, too long-standing for simple happiness. But maybe the beginning of happiness. Maybe the foundation on which happiness could eventually be built. His phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Cole? This is David Martinez. I'm a programmer, self-taught, been working maintenance IT for 6 years. I saw your story on the news and I wanted to say thank you. For what? For showing people like us that we matter, that what we build has value even if we don't have the right degrees or connections. I've been too scared to apply for real engineering positions because I figured they'd never take me seriously. But after watching what you did, I'm going to try. The young man's voice cracked slightly. You prove that we deserve to be in the room where it happens. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Good luck, David. I hope you get the job. Thanks. And Mr. Cole, when you build something great again, I hope everyone knows it's yours from the start this time. The call ended. Ethan stood in his kitchen thinking about all the other David Martinezes out there, self-taught, underestimated, convinced they didn't belong in rooms where decisions got made, thinking about how many of them might see his story and decide to try anyway. That was worth something too, maybe more than the money, more than the vindication. The idea that his fight had meant something to people he'd never meet. Dad? Sophie appeared in the doorway. Are you okay? You look sad. Not sad, just thinking. About what? About how sometimes the hard things are worth doing even when they're scary. Sophie came over and hugged him around the waist. Like fighting the bad man? Yeah, like that. I'm glad you fought him. Me too, baby. Me too. Outside, Chicago's autumn night settled over their neighborhood. Inside, Ethan Cole stood in his house with his daughter and felt the ghosts of 20 years finally beginning to quiet. The story wasn't perfect, the ending wasn't clean, but it was real, and it was his, and that was enough. Sometimes, that had to be enough.